We've been dreaming about life on Mars for a long time. Not only about growing potatoes there in the future, but also about all the potatoes that could have been there in the past. Has there ever been life on Mars? Recently, scientists have found something that could be evidence of that. Let's find out what happened. Mars is the fourth planet from the Sun. A human hasn't set foot on Mars yet, but robots have set their wheels. The first spacecraft that visited the Red Planet were NASA Viking landers. They flew there back in 1976 and sent us a lot of interesting data. Back then, we didn't know anything about Mars. To us, it looked like a cold, lifeless desert. But since we're so similar, scientists began to wonder, has it always been like this? Or is it possible that once Mars used to be thriving and full of life? And in 2022, NASA's Mars rover Perseverance found something that could shed a light on this mystery. But first of all, what is Perseverance? Scientists have suggested that if there was life on Mars once, it's unlikely that it could simply disappear without a trace. It must have left some traces, perhaps underground, where they would be protected from radioactive solar tantrums and other nastiness. So we need to check the rocks. It's important to note that we aren't looking for life on Mars right now. There most likely isn't any. Instead, we want to look into the distant past of our twin planet. We're talking billions of years ago, when Mars could have been warm, green, and far from lifeless. In other words, we have to find dead microbes and various chemical compounds similar to ones on the Earth. This is the mission of our main character, Perseverance. It arrived on Mars in February of 2021. The spacecraft landed on the bottom of the 30-mile-wide Jezero crater, and after landing, it scooted over to the west, to the place that prompted scientists to choose Jezero for research. This place is a dried-up river delta, and this former river is already more than 3.5 billion years old. The Jezero crater itself was once a large lake. Yup, apparently there was life on Mars. And scientists have suggested that these places would be perfect as bodyguards of microbes. That's exactly what bacteria do on Earth. They hide, being still in the depths of lakes and ponds. So we could probably find traces there. The researchers believe that this particular lake has the highest scientific value in the entire mission. The highest chance to find rocks on which such bacteria could survive is here in Jezero. So, Perseverance went to the delta. The row wasn't easy, though. The rover missed a little and landed further than planned. As one famous movie said, "This little maneuver's going to cost us 51 years." Fortunately, Perseverance took only 1 year, and on the way, it was able to explore Jezero a little. The rover uses a complex built-in tool to explore the world. The tool is called Scanning Habitable Environments with Raman and Luminescence for Organics and Chemicals, or just SHERLOC. Boy, NASA sure loves its acronyms. As the device approached the delta, the signal of organic molecules became stronger. Soon, these signals were everywhere, and besides, they were the brightest that the scientists have ever seen. What does it mean? Elementary, my dear Watson. You know, Sherlock. It's time to dig. Since July 2021, Perseverance has drilled and collected 4 thin cores of sedimentary rock. The total number of collected rocks at the moment is 12. This is the first time in history that we're collecting something like this on another planet. These 4 cores were found on 2 rocks called Skinner Ridge and Wildcat Ridge. The first pair of cores, the ones from the Skinner Ridge, don't seem very interesting at first glance. They're quite close to what we can find in many places on Earth. However, if we look at them closer, we'll see that they're dotted with round grains of some dark material. These dark grains could have once been deposited on them by an ancient river, the same one that flowed into Jezero. It's possible that the river brought them from places hundreds of miles away from Jezero. And that's pretty cool. If we study these cores, we'll be able to learn even more about the far corners of Mars. Well, there are no corners on it, but you get the idea. Then, in April 2022, Perseverance did arrive at the delta, and then scientists finally found what they were looking for. The discovery, to put it mildly, excited them. They found two more cores, which held organic substances. This pair was taken from the Wildcat Ridge. It's found very close to the Skinner Ridge, but the two rocks are quite different from each other. These samples are lighter in color and more uniform. Most likely, they're mudstone, an unusual rock similar to clay but harder and unable to absorb water. They're also finer grained than the cores of the Skinner Ridge. Why does it matter? Because the finer the grains in the stone, the more likely it is that there may be some traces of a past life in it. On Earth, fine-grained stones most often lie on the bottoms of ponds and in similar places. There, they can preserve the remains of dead organisms and similar stuff for years. And this is exactly what we found on them. Additionally, according to scientists, there was more organic matter in these two cores than in any other place studied by Perseverance so far. It probably accumulated there while the lake was gradually evaporating billions of years ago. So, there really was life on Mars? Well, let's slow down a little. Organic substances are molecules holding carbon. And yes, on Earth, they're most often associated with life, but not always. Sometimes they can form as a result of other things. Therefore, we cannot say for sure whether there was life on Mars. We don't know if these molecules really remain from some Martian microbes, or if they're the result of some other things. But the discovery is still very significant. We have to literally keep digging this way. To learn more about this organic matter, scientists need to collect a couple more samples of fine-grained rock. It would also be great to study the material lying around these former reservoirs. Perseverance has already moved to another area, to a place with a beautiful name, Enchanted Lake. Now it needs to look for similar things there. It will also continue to study Lake Jezero. Eventually, Perseverance will climb to the top of the delta and then continue exploring ancient sites outside the crater. Sometime before the end of 2022, Perseverance will probably have 6 or more samples of the Martian cores. Unfortunately, its tools, though complex, are quite limited. This data alone won't be enough for us to get a complete picture. Therefore, NASA plans to send other spacecraft to Jezero in the coming years. Together with the European Space Agency, they're working on the next robotic mission, known as the Mars Sample Return. The name speaks for itself. These devices will arrive and take away all the test tubes from the old Prospector Perseverance. After that, these samples will be delivered to Earth, though not by Amazon Prime, and then scientists will be able to analyze them in advanced laboratories. However, all this will take a really long time. The launch of this mission is scheduled for 2027-2028, and the spacecrafts won't be able to return until 2033. But if everything goes well, it will be the first samples in history delivered to Earth from Mars. In other words, there's still enough space for research, literally. And yes, we don't yet know the true meaning of these finds. But that's why the entire mission was created, right? And who knows? Maybe in a few years we'll finally find out the truth about what happened on Mars billions of years ago. Ooh, check out the Martian! Made you look. Look.
There are tons of weird things on Mars. Spoons, noodles, doors, even faces. Are they all really just rocks? Besides, it's not the only planet in our solar system full of mysterious things. Let's check them out. Recently, we found a strange thing on Mars that looks like a smooth, spoon-like object. It grabbed everyone's attention after NASA's Curiosity rover spotted it. The rock, with a handle and rounded tip, looks like it's floating in the rover's photo. People on the internet are puzzled about what it might be. Some are joking that it's a Martian's bowling pin, or even a shoehorn left by extraterrestrial creatures. But Andrew Good from NASA says it's not that exciting. Turns out it's just a rock shaped by the wind over a long time. These kinds of rocks with odd shapes are common on Mars. They're called ventifacts. Ventifact is a rock that can get scratched, dented, or smoothed out by tiny particles carried by the wind. You'll usually find these kinds of rocks in dry places where there's not much grass or trees to block the wind, and where there's a lot of sand blowing around. Sometimes, the wind can carve ventifacts into really cool shapes, like the mushroom rocks you can see in the White Desert National Park in Egypt. These rocks look like giant mushrooms because the wind wears away the bottom part faster than the top, making them stand tall and slim. Ventifacts aren't the only cool Martian rocks. Check out this series of surreal spikes protruding from the red surface. NASA's Curiosity rover stumbled upon them while exploring the Gale crater on Mars. They quickly caught everyone's attention. Twisting structures resembling spikes looked like some extraterrestrial doors. Even the SETI Institute, an organization focused on searching for extraterrestrial life, tweeted about the image, referring to it as a cool rock. But in reality, these are just hoodoos. These tall and thin spires occur when hard rock sits atop softer rock layers. Martian spikes are likely cemented fillings of ancient fractures in sedimentary rock, with softer material eroded away over time. Again, there are many hoodoos on Earth too. They're also called fairy chimneys or tent rocks. You can find them in places like Utah's Bryce Canyon and the Colorado Plateau. NASA is excited about these weird structures because they can help us learn more about the history of the Gale crater. There was also a rock that looked like a jelly donut. We called this rock Pinnacle Island. It was spotted by NASA's cameras. However, just 4 days earlier, it was nowhere to be seen. So how did it magically disappear? In a very anticlimactic way, it was kicked up by one of Opportunity's wheels as it traversed the Martian terrain. But there's still some mystery surrounding that jelly donut. Analysis revealed that Pinnacle Island contains unusually high levels of sulfur and manganese. Both of these things are water-soluble. In other words, there might have been some water action that created these elements in the rock. So this tiny thing suddenly caused a lot of drama, and an entire lawsuit against NASA. It claimed that the agency failed to investigate a possible fungus growing on Mars. Jelly donut fungus. But not all our findings are natural. Another puzzling discovery was this thing the Perseverance rover spotted. It's something that looks like tangled spaghetti or string. Just like the donut, this mysterious object showed up in a rover camera image and then vanished from the sandy ground in several days. It turns out that it could be debris from the rover's landing system. Perseverance landed in the Jezero crater in February 2021. It had a rough landing and accidentally scattered debris around. Some of these debris pieces have been showing up in the rover's images for a while now. The string-like object is likely a piece of shredded Dacron netting, which is a type of fiber used in thermal blankets. These blankets help regulate equipment temperatures during the super hot process of landing on Mars. It probably underwent significant unraveling and shredding due to strong forces during the landing. Thermal blankets lost a bunch of stuff back then. For example, this shiny foil piece spotted in June. The rover found it on a rock. What's remarkable is how far some of the debris has traveled. The rover landed about 1.2 miles away from where it's currently exploring. It's probably because the crash threw the debris into the air, and the Martian winds carried it over such a distance. Mars is known for its strong winds, which can move lightweight objects. However, while it's fun to stumble upon them on images, there are concerns about the debris and trash on Mars. We haven't even fixed this problem on Earth, and we're already creating it on Mars. The debris we left on the red planet is already accumulating in an area called Hogwallow Flats. Plus, the debris can accidentally contaminate the sample tubes used for collecting Martian rocks. So far, NASA isn't overly worried about this, but they're keeping a close eye on it to prevent any issues with the rovers. Now, how about not things, but animals? Curiosity caused quite a stir when it captured something that looked like a rat on Mars. Some started speculating that it could be evidence of indigenous Martian life, or even that this rodent was brought along by Curiosity. But the Mars rat, once again, turned out to be just a weird rock. It looked interesting because of the natural processes like wind erosion and mechanical abrasion. We also found some worm-looking things. Curiosity snapped a picture of a formation that looks like worms wriggling across the Martian landscape. Despite its tiny size, this formation stands out with its unique shape and rough texture. It's probably made of durable material resistant to Mars's harsh erosion. And finally, our top mysterious finding is the face on Mars. Cydonia is a region on Mars that has captured both scientific and popular interest. It's located in Mars's northern hemisphere. It lies between heavily cratered regions to the south and relatively smooth plains to the north. There's a theory that the northern plains may have once been ocean beds. Maybe Cydonia was once a coastal zone. This place is full of interesting and beautiful features that tell us a lot about the history of the Red Planet. But its most interesting feature was the Martian face. This thing gained widespread attention when it was snapped by the Viking 1 orbiter in 1976. Some believed that it was evidence of a long-lost Martian civilization. At first, NASA dismissed it as a trick of light and shadow. But after some analysis, it turned out to be, yep, another rock. We also saw a face of a bear. It was captured by the high-resolution imaging experiment camera. In an image, we can see a circular fracture pattern that looks like a bear's head, with two craters forming the eyes and a V-shaped collapse structure like the nose. The head likely formed because something heavy settled on top of an old hole in the ground. This hole was filled with either lava or mud. The nose-like feature is speculated to be a volcanic or mud vent. But why do we keep seeing these strange things on Mars? Sometimes our brains can trick us into seeing things like faces or objects in rocks and other things. But these are just illusions called pareidolia. Pareidolia is a psychological phenomenon that makes us see familiar patterns or shapes, especially faces, where none actually exist. It's because the brain encounters something it doesn't recognize or understand right away. It tries to find things that look the most like this one. So it sees random patterns, textures, or sounds as something meaningful and recognizable. That's why a chair and clothes on it seems like a super creepy human-like figure at night. It also causes you to see faces or shapes in clouds, or hear recognizable sounds and even words in random noise. It's a fascinating proof of the power of our perception, but we also should be careful with it and not let our imagination run wild. So Mars has two moons, Phobos and Deimos. And apart from the bizarre shape, there's nothing remarkable about them, except for one thing. Not so long ago, scientists discovered a strange phenomenon on the surface of Phobos, and they still can't find any explanation for it. What is this phenomenon, and what does it tell us about the history of our solar system? Let's find out. American astronomer Asaph Hall discovered Phobos and Deimos back in 1877. Did you know that all the planets in our solar system are named after Greek and Roman deities? For example, Mars or Ares is the famous deity of war. That's why the satellites of this red planet were named after the sons of Ares, Phobos and Deimos. These beautiful names actually have creepy meanings: fear and horror. In 1971, NASA's Mariner 9 telescope took the first pictures. That's how we found out that these guys weren't at all like our moon. They had this weird shape, a strange and unstable orbit. Moreover, there are no other moons in the solar system that move as close to their parent planet as these two. Well, they are its suns after all. But even though they are very close to Mars, if you were standing on the surface of the red planet, you would hardly be able to see them. That's because the curvature of Mars hides Phobos and Deimos from view. Even if you were somewhere on the equator, Phobos would look like an ordinary asteroid to you, and Deimos would look like a star. All because these satellites are basically crumbs compared to our moon. They're the smallest and least bright moons in the entire solar system, which is ironic considering their mighty names. Anyway, It seems that everything should be pretty clear with these two satellites. But nope, there's a problem. You see, scientists reconstruct the history of space based on the traces found on different space objects. Dents, scratches, cracks, all these things can tell us what happened billions of years ago. For a long time, scientists were sure that, just like their Greek prototypes, Phobos and Deimos were twins. But then, NASA's Viking orbiter took new photos of the satellites, and that's when they discovered a significant difference between the two. The entire surface of Phobos was covered with huge grooves. Those were a series of long, deep pits stretching from one end of Phobos to the other. You may say, what's the big deal? All space objects have this kind of stuff on them. And yeah, there are other satellites with similar grooves and scratches, but none of them has as many as Phobos. It's completely covered in grooves, and they're huge, up to 12 miles long and 660 feet wide. And that's not all. Some of these grooves intersect with others. This means that Phobos has experienced not one, but many traumatic events. But what exactly happened to it? Actually, scientists are still not completely sure. However, they have a few ideas. And these theories can tell us not only about the past of Phobos, but also predict its future. Theory 1. Asteroid impact. Well, the first suspect is quite obvious. There's a large, almost 6-mile wide crater on Phobos. It's called Angeline Stickney. It was named after the wife of Asaph Hall, the scientist who discovered the satellites. Adorable. So that's what the first theory sounds like. Once upon a time, an astronomical body crashed into Phobos. The impact was so strong that it left a large crater. And the effect of the collision left a bunch of grooves everywhere on Phobos. It sounds logical at first. However, scientists have noticed a flaw in this theory. They learned that these grooves actually formed not inside the crater, but next to it. So it wasn't a collision that created them. Besides, what about those grooves that intersect with the others? Or is it just a big cosmic coincidence? Well, the search for truth continued. Theory 2. It's all because of space debris. Yes, there's a difference between these two theories. In this case, the grooves aren't a direct consequence of the collision. Rather, it goes something like this. Something crashed into Phobos. This impact caused a bunch of rocks to be thrown into space. Some of them were lost in the universe forever, but others were small enough to be pulled back to Phobos. Passing next to the moon at a steep angle, they would crash into it, jumping away, and so on. And since the gravity of Phobos is very weak, perhaps they couldn't stick to it. In other words, these rocks were continuously pulled toward and pushed off of the satellite for many, many years. This theory explains the intersecting grooves. It's because the rocks were constantly falling into those places. It sounds quite logical, but there's another problem. We don't see any boulders on Mars or on the surface of its moons. But all this debris was supposed to get trapped by gravity and remain somewhere in the planet's orbit. This, or simply become part of Phobos. In other words, if this were true, we'd find evidence of this theory under layers of dust. But that didn't happen, so this explanation didn't satisfy astronomers either. Therefore, they continued to look for the culprit. Maybe the grooves have nothing to do with Stickney Crater at all. Maybe the real culprit is something else, something even more powerful. Could it be Mars itself? Theory 3. Mars is a twist villain. The previous theories imply that Phobos and Deimos were originally pieces of Mars. Like once upon a time they broke away from it and became satellites, just like our moon. But what if that wasn't the case? Observations made by NASA's Mars Global Surveyor show that Phobos and Deimos are made up of elements which are mainly found in meteorites and asteroids. So, what if Phobos and Deimos are asteroids? There's an asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Given the size, shape, and composition of Phobos and Deimos, scientists have suggested that once upon a time they belonged to this belt. However, one day they flew out of it, and then gravity pulled them to Mars. This phenomenon is called asteroid capture. It's very strange though. Yeah, the asteroid capture isn't uncommon, but these two have been flying next to Mars for what, billions of years? It's weird that their orbits have remained the same. In addition, the atmosphere of Mars is very rarefied, and because of this, it could hardly capture any asteroids. In theory, they should have separated from Mars at the first opportunity. However, this didn't happen. It means that somehow they got stuck, and Mars immediately began to destroy them. Yep, an unexpected twist. In this version, Mars turns out to be a villain. By studying the past, we've found some evidence of future crimes. The mysterious grooves of Phobos could be caused by tidal forces between Mars and Phobos. The Moon and Earth also exchange these, slightly distorting each other. But since Phobos is much closer to Mars, the impact of gravitational forces is much stronger. In other words, the gravity of Mars is gradually destroying Phobos. Every 100 years, the satellite gets 0.7 inches closer to Mars. It also shrinks as much as 6.5 feet, becoming even more fragile and weaker. The smaller it gets, the more the tidal forces impact it, creating strange grooves and scratches on Phobos. Yep, somewhere in 30 to 50 million years, Phobos will either collide with Mars or disintegrate and turn into a bunch of small rocks. And then Mars will also have rings, like Saturn and Neptune. That's why Phobos is called the doomed Martian moon. Anyway, these are all only theories, but the dramatic backstory of Phobos gives us an idea of how dynamic extraterrestrial objects can be. The more we learn about them, the more we discover about the secrets of the origin of not only Mars, but also other objects in our solar system. If one day we really colonize Mars, studying its moons can help us a lot. Let's hope that the upcoming MMX mission will reveal some of the most exciting secrets Mars's moons are hiding.
Dust storms on Mars can really go crazy. They hurtle through the red planet's southern hemisphere, especially during the summer. These storms can grow and encompass large areas of the planet, as happened in January 2022. Then, a dust storm covered almost twice the area of the United States. Could it be something like this that caused one of the robots we sent to Mars to go missing? The atmosphere and climate are harsh on Mars. It's mostly a desert with strong winds and average temperatures of minus 81 degrees Fahrenheit. It drops down to minus 220 at the poles during the winter. A lander needs to be specifically equipped and very sturdy to withstand such conditions. But researchers thought the Beagle 2 could handle the difficult trip to the red planet. June 3, 2003. A team of researchers got one of their pioneering robots they were about to send to space ready. It was a small and compact lander called the Beagle 2. Its mission was to touch down on Mars and search for what the world has been actively looking for decades now: life on the red planet. Now, the touchdown was due on December 25th, but the signal never came. The team tried to contact the spaceship, but at one point, they had to accept they wouldn't be able to reach it. Some thought the landing was too difficult and complex after all, so the lander crashed. But they couldn't find any technical errors. Others had a theory that the lander may have become entangled in its own parachute and fell down to the surface of Mars. Either way, the Beagle 2 was considered missing, until 2015, when NASA took pictures of what could be the remains of the lost lander. They weren't just smashed debris, the components actually looked to be intact. The lander's remains were lying with its solar panels partially deployed around 3 miles away from the site where it was supposed to land. Apparently, the Beagle 2 managed to land successfully, but its radio antenna got blocked. That's why researchers couldn't control it from Earth or communicate with it. But no one knows exactly why it happened. Have you heard of a face on Mars? In the 1970s, one of NASA's spaceships took the iconic images of the Martian surface that showed a face-like formation, as you can see in the upper part of the picture. If you have a rich imagination, you can easily see a nose, 2 eyes, a mouth, and an unusual hairdo. Some even thought it was a monument built on the red planet by another civilization. How about some other unusual things people have found on Mars, like Happy Face Crater? You can easily see why it has this nickname. Or rocks in different shapes, a pancake, brachiosaurus, or a fish. Mars also has a waffle-shaped island on its surface. It's a 1.2-mile-wide feature you can see in the area of lava flows. It might be the result of lava pushing this formation from below. It seems astronomers have also got some images of blue dunes. It's a sea of stunning dark dunes that strong winds sculpted into long lines. They surround the planet's northern polar cap and cover a region as large as Texas. The red planet is usually known for its brown sandy dunes, so these ones certainly came as a surprise. In reality, though, they're not really blue. If you could visit Mars right now just to take a look, you'd see that these dunes appear brown and orange like the rest. And the picture is a false color image. Scientists often use false colors to highlight differences in something. For example, here it's the difference in depth. Also, the biggest valley on Mars is so large it could eat our Grand Canyon for breakfast. It's a fascinating system of canyons 2,500 miles long called Valles Marineris, and it's over 10 times as long as the Grand Canyon. Now, if you could stretch this Martian canyon, it would go from coast to coast of the entire United States. Since Mars doesn't have any active plate tectonics, no one knows for sure how this canyon formed. One theory says a chain of volcanoes located on the other side of Mars, the one that includes Olympus Mons, bent the crust from the opposite side of the planet. This powerful force caused cracks in the Martian crust, as well as activated enormous amounts of water lying under the surface. This water then emerged and carved the rock away. The force activated glaciers too, and they possibly created new pathways in this gigantic canyon system. Volcanoes on the Martian surface could have erupted about 50,000 years ago, although the most powerful eruptions happened 2 to 3 billion years ago. But the planet doesn't have active volcanoes today. Most of the heat stored in its interior during the planet's formation has been lost. So now, Mars's outer crust is way too thick for the molten rock to reach the surface. But a long time ago, eruptions formed giant volcanoes, and these volcanoes most likely had an important role in melting ice deposits, which released floods of water onto the Martian surface. Now, Mars has a thin atmosphere with a volume of gas, mostly carbon dioxide, less than 1% of Earth's. But 4 billion years ago, it was way warmer and wetter than now. Its atmosphere must have been thicker back then, too. That's why it could create a powerful greenhouse effect and trap sunlight. Mars also has a powerful magnetic field. Similar to Earth's, it formed because of the currents of molten metals in the planet's core. But unlike our home planet, Mars lost its magnetic field after its core had cooled down. And without it, the planet didn't have any protection from the solar wind, which is a stream of charged particles flowing from the sun. The solar wind pulled away most of Mars's atmosphere in just a couple of 100 million years, give or take. This is what makes those powerful Martian dust storms even more intense. Mars has a fascinating history. Judging by the planet's glaciers, Mars has probably gone through multiple ice ages, just like Earth. A team of researchers got images of about 60,000 Martian rocks. Rocks were different in size and distributed randomly, which means they probably formed during different ice ages. Glaciers hide their own stories too. Who knows what kinds of gases, rocks, or even microbes could be trapped inside? Now, if you could get into a time machine and stop at 4 billion years ago, on Mars of course, the chances are you would see spectacular scenes of flooding. Maybe there would even be some form of life on the planet's surface. A strong meteorite impact that formed the red planet's Gale crater could be something that triggered that mega flood. After that collision, the temperatures on the planet got insanely hot. This caused the melting of all that ice that was stored on the Martian surface at that time. The flooding was so massive, it changed the geological structure of the planet's surface. It carved out big ripples, as well as waves in the sedimentary rock. Now, speaking of water, vapor has been noticed escaping the atmosphere of Mars. Also, researchers have found some evidence of water flowing on the planet's surface. There are dark streaks in the soil. They seem to get bigger in the summer and shrink over the winter. There are numerous dried-out valleys and river channels on the planet. It's possible that liquid water once flowed there. Now, most of it could be locked up in ice caps or even hidden under the surface. More and more things hint that Mars used to be habitable. Mars is the only planet we know about where only robots live. 5 rovers make up the Martian population. Those are Perseverance, Opportunity, Spirit, Sojourner, and Curiosity. These robots are there to take pictures and samples of soil and air, and maybe even find life on the red planet. And someday, we may reunite with them on Mars. Who knows? Oh, and by the way, if you really could get into a time machine and stop at 4 billion years ago on Mars, then I'd like to buy you lunch and talk about it. My treat.
Imagine you're stepping on board a once-in-a-lifetime Arctic expedition that departs to the east coast of Cape Bathurst in Canada's Northwest Territories. It's said that the location you're headed is unmatched on planet Earth. The final destination is an unbelievable location known as Smoking Hills. These red-striped rocks have been burning there continuously for centuries. It has minerals there that are only found outside our planet, on Mars. Some scientists even believe that the site can be an important case study for discovering life on the red planet. On board the small cruiser ship, you head out to the deck and spot an unusual scene on the horizon. You see clouds of smoke forming close to a seaside hill. It's as if a party of hundreds of people did campfires all at the same time. But this smoke is not man-made, your guide tells you. Naturally, most people guess it's a volcano. Some people on the deck even guess that an eruption might happen anytime soon by the looks of it. Your guide laughs, explaining that this is far from the case. Volcanoes are usually found on the edge of tectonic plates. It's a rupture on the crust of the Earth that allows hot lava and gases to escape to the surface. In the Smoking Hills, the story is different. The constant smoke is caused by a natural phenomenon. But you'll learn all about it over the next few days. As strange as it may sound, these rocks didn't begin burning yesterday. According to experts, the ground on Smoking Hills has been releasing clouds of smoke for at least a couple hundred years, non-stop. You heard it right. But experts are still unsure how long they've been burning. It could be thousands of years. Now, before you leave the ship, some instructions are in order. The expedition leader explains you're going to enter a high-risk place. So, we replace your regular hiking boots and clothes with a special suit and gas mask before stepping on site. The clouds of smoke you are now watching from a safe distance are composed of sulfuric acid. This chemical is highly toxic. You need to be careful while breathing its air. So remember to keep those masks on. Oh, and as tempting as it may look, don't touch anything with your bare hands. Legend says that the first crew to explore the Smoking Hills found it by mistake. And imagine, these people had none of the gear you're going to use. First written records on the Smoking Hills date back to the 1800s. Irish explorer Captain Robert McClure led an expedition to find the lost explorer Sir John Franklin and had disappeared for over 5 years. The crew took a wrong left along the way and stumbled upon these burning rocks. They also thought it was an active volcano, much like you did, but they discovered how wrong they were when they stepped on site. McClure got curious and took a sample rock back to the boat, and the story says it burnt a hole through his mahogany desk. Remember this when you feel like taking a souvenir home with you. It might not burn a hole on your desk, but it sure will fly through your pocket or any container you try to use to take it. Now, it's day 2, and you're ready to explore the location. The expedition's crew is divided into smaller boats. On your way to the shore, you notice a group of animals. They are far from the smoke, and it looks like they have themselves a mealtime. The Smoking Hills are located in the Arctic tundra, and there are rich fauna and flora nearby. Slowly, you're approaching the shore. Now you see the cliffs are made of red striped rocks that look like they've been hand-painted by someone. There's another place on Earth with similar hills, and it is located in Peru, all the way to South America. The so-called Rainbow Mountain or Seven-Colored Mountain is a mesmerizing natural phenomenon. They are formed by the sediment of different materials. While the smoking hills are mainly red, over in Peru, these mountains have stripes of lavender, gold, red, and even turquoise. When you finally leave the boat on the foot of the smoking hills, you begin your hike up. Stepping is difficult with your special boots. The soles are made specially to support high-degree temperatures, but it sure is hard to keep your balance. Before you know it, you're as close to the burning rocks as you can get. Your first impression is to get out of there as fast as possible. Conditions for human life are harsh over there. It's inhospitable, and everything about the place says you shouldn't stay for long. But you are also beyond curious. You might ask yourself how these rocks keep burning for so long. The science behind it is not too complicated. The rocks you're looking at are called shales. They are a type of sedimentary rock formed by clay minerals. Your guide explains that the secret to the smoke lies on the ground. The soil is formed by sulfur and coal. When they get in contact with oxygen, they spontaneously ignite, releasing the smoke you're now seeing. The few ponds in the region have very acidic water. Scientists say that this world region is the only one to show a negative pH. It means this water is naturally corrosive, so you don't dare drink it. Make sure to bring your own water bottle when leaving the ship. You spend a few hours there, but it seems like a whole day. The suits are heavy, and breathing through a gas mask is not your idea of comfort. At the end of the day, you head back to the ship, enjoying a beautiful Arctic sunset on the way. On the morning of your third day, you're in for a nice surprise. You're not heading out again. Instead, you're going to take a trip to outer space. Metaphorically, of course. Your guide talks about the connection between the smoking hills and Mars. Looking for life on Mars has been a journey all on its own, but recently, scientists discovered the exciting presence of jarosite on the smoking hills. And guess what? Jarosite is an abundant mineral on Mars. Experts think that this may indicate that Mars did have running water at some point in the past, since jarosite needs groundwater to form. This huge discovery may take science many steps closer to a breakthrough. Has life really existed on other planets in the solar system? Mars has been on the map for scientific research for being the most likely planet to have developed life. The atmospheric temperature now is unbearable for above-ground life, but it was similar to Earth's at some point. The most important proof needed is to find the evidence of running water. Right now, as we speak, the Curiosity rover is out there looking for any piece of information that can hint at the existence of life on Mars, past or present. Just out of curiosity. Curiosity, the rover has been exploring the surface of Mars for over 3,566 days so far. If you do the math, it makes for 9 years and 279 days. And in case you're wondering, why are we so eager to find life on other planets? According to NASA, the research for life on other planets can help us explain a lot about our own history. Where we came from, and maybe even where we're headed. And who could have guessed that scientists could begin to find answers for that in the Arctic tundra? That's exciting, right? Now, it's day 4 aboard the ship, and the expedition is coming to an end. Time to head back to mainland Canada. You just visited one of the world's most inhospitable places with a lot of impressions. Now, it's time to tell us what you thought about the journey and what you learned along the way. Write it all down in the comments below. How many people do we need to create a new civilization? And not on Earth, but on Mars, and in limited conditions. And if we create this colony and send them off, what problems will they face? How can they survive that far away from home without any support? A recent scientific study sheds light on these questions, so let's take a look at it. Alright, so you want to colonize Mars, right? Well, it's not an easy task. Mars is the fourth most distant planet from the Sun and the seventh largest in the solar system. This lonely red guy is very similar to our Earth. Moreover, before it became a boundless desert, it could well have even looked like Earth now. Millions of years ago, there was water, oceans, plants, and who knows, maybe even life. It would be nice to put all these cool things back there. No wonder we've been talking about colonization of this planet for a very long time. Now, SpaceX claims that their proposed interplanetary spacecraft could deliver 100 people to Mars. The owner of the company, billionaire Elon Musk, talked about creating a fleet that could provide a constant flow of resources to Mars. But how realistic are all these fantasies? Actually, not very much. Before sending people to Mars, we need to solve a number of issues. For example, the incredible radiation exposure, toxic soil, low gravity, low temperatures, and all sorts of other nasty things. And this is just the beginning. It will take at least a couple of decades to create a vehicle that can actually successfully land on Mars and return back. But let's do a thought experiment and imagine that we finally decided to colonize Mars. How will things turn out? Recently, scientists published a new study on this topic. This study is called Minimum Number of Settlers for Survival on Another Planet. The author is Jean-Marc Salati, professor at the National Polytechnic Institute of Bordeaux in France. His article was published in the Scientific Reports journal. As you might have guessed, the study was trying to find out how we could colonize another planet. How many resources do we need? How should this colony live? What kind of work should they do? And how long will it take? And, of course, exactly how many people do we need for all of this? Let's try to answer that. Now, imagine that we've moved into a wonderful future. Well, not really. A terrible future, actually. In his study, Salati suggested that life on Earth was threatened by some catastrophic event, so the only way for humanity to survive is to go to Mars or some other planet. In this imaginary scenario, unfortunately, the supply delivery from Earth was interrupted, or even gone. Now, the colony has to support itself somehow. Well, here's where we already stumble upon a bunch of problems. For example, we're not sure how well the people in the colony will work together.
Hey!
Will they communicate with each other like normal human beings? Will they share their time and resources as they should? Humans are constantly ruining things for other humans. I can even bet that it was their fault we had to flee to Mars. But even if we forget about that, how about organizational issues? What equipment do we have? What will we use to extract resources? What skills would we need? You know what? Who cares? In our case, these things don't matter. All that we know is that the colony doesn't have a lot of initial resources and equipment, and the human factor is absolutely unpredictable. So the chances of survival are pretty low, but we need to survive somehow. In this case, Salati describes two things that will have a huge impact on our survival. These things are essentially variables in a mathematical equation. The first one is the availability of local resources. Basically, it means water, oxygen, and all sorts of useful chemical elements. These resources should be somehow mined and easy to use. Fortunately, we're not starting from scratch. We already know a lot about Mars. What resources are there? How can they be used for life support, agriculture, and industrial production? The colony is lucky because all this has been studied at various seminars and published in reports and books over the past years. Thanks to this, we know what will be available to our colony. For example, we know that gases could be extracted from the atmosphere and minerals from the soil. On Mars, we could provide such things as iron, glass, and even organic compounds. The most important problem here is the service life of the equipment that our new Martians start with. They'll have to get as many materials as possible before the tools break. Keeping them in good condition will be almost the most important task. The second thing is the production capacity, or the speed of work. We have a specific list of things we need to do, make some tools for example, and all this must be produced in sufficient quantities before the literal deadlines. Salati says that the most important thing here will be the so-called sharing factor. Imagine one person trying to survive on Mars. They would have to do all the tasks on their own. They would need to find or build their own system for supplying drinking water, oxygen, and electricity generation. We've already seen how this played out in the movie The Martian. This task wasn't easy at all. There's always not enough time, and all of this is just too much for one person to handle. Unless you're Matt Damon, of course. So, surprisingly, we need a fairly large colony. This significantly distributes the burden. Each person spends less effort, gets tired less, and, as a result, the efficiency and speed of work grow. This is where the sharing factor comes into play. Now we need to calculate this number. If we want, for example, to build something, how many people do we need to do this quickly and efficiently? How can we optimize the work as much as possible? Well, it depends on the needs of these people, on available resources, random things like weather, and so on. But in general, this number can be estimated and calculated using some mathematical functions. Salati tells in more detail about these functions in his article. You can read it yourself if you're interested, but in general, he describes 5 areas that need to be taken into account when calculating this number. These areas are ecosystem management, energy production, industry, buildings, and the human factor. The human factor includes such things as the upbringing and education of children, sports, games, music, and so on. In the end, it all comes down to 2 things: how much time we have and how well the people in the colony will work with each other. So, what was the result of all these calculations? In the end, Salati found out that we would need at least 110 people to successfully survive on Mars. This is the minimal number needed to create a self-sufficient civilization. And it will be better if we don't take too many people with us. The more people we take on the spacecraft, the more difficult it will be to predict the results. After all, as we've already said, humans are always ruining things for other humans. So it's better to stick with about 110 people. Of course, this is a rough estimate, and there are a bunch of different assumptions and uncertainties, but even this number is already very useful. Now the scientists know how many people is a minimum for colonization of another planet. Colonizing other planets is a very complex issue, and it will take us a very long time to resolve it. It's very unlikely that we'll fly to Mars in the near future. This task may take several decades, or even a century. Therefore, the best solution would be to try our best to save Earth until we can begin to conquer other planets.
What a nice cosmic family. Meet Mars. I bet you've met him before. These 2 little guys are Phobos and Deimos, Mars's small moons. But it seems like Mars isn't treating the little ones the right way. Phobos and Deimos are believed to be captured asteroids. However, Phobos is gradually moving closer to Mars due to gravity, and it is predicted that it will eventually be destroyed by the planet's gravity within the next 35 million years. I won't be around then. So, I imagine this will result in a ring of debris around Mars, similar to Saturn's rings. However, this process is a natural phenomenon and not an act of destruction by Mars. Apparently, Phobos is getting ripped apart by the crazy gravitational forces of the red planet. But wait, there's more! Phobos has these crazy parallel grooves all over its surface. We used to think that they were from an asteroid crash, but now scientists think they're actually from Mars's intense gravity pulling the moon apart. Talk about a rough ride! Scientists have this wild idea that when a little guy like Phobos gets too close to a big guy like Mars, it starts to stretch out towards it. They call it the tidal force. Phobos is predicted to get stretched out so much that it'll actually break apart. Crazy, right? And the debris from the moon will form a tiny ring around Mars, just like Saturn's rings. Now, some people thought that Phobos' tiger stripes were caused by tidal forces before, but that theory got shut down because the moon is just too darn fluffy. But now, these genius researchers ran some computer simulations and found out that maybe there's a hard shell underneath all that fluff that could create grooves on the surface. But don't worry. At the rate Phobos is going, it's going to crash into Mars in about 40 million years. But if tidal forces are already tearing it apart, it might not even last that long. However, we'll still have the chance to learn more about Phobos. NASA just picked 10 rock star researchers from all over the U.S. to join the science working team for JAXA's Martian Moons Exploration, or just MMX mission. As NASA-supported participating scientists, they'll be helping JAXA explore the 2 Martian moons, Phobos and Deimos. And get this, they're even planning to land on Phobos and grab a surface sample. The mission is set to launch in 2024, and we'll get our hands on that sample in 2029. 7 of the lucky researchers will be using the MMX flight instruments to conduct their research. Phobos is a real oddball. It's only 17 miles wide and orbits Mars at a distance of 3,728 miles, to be precise. Now that's way closer than Earth's moon, which takes a whole 27 days to orbit us. But Phobos is in a death spiral toward Mars and is slowly falling towards the planet's surface at a rate of 6 feet every 100 years. But there must be a reason why Mars is acting that nastily, right? What if it's all just because of plain vengeance? Well, okay, picture this. Mars is minding its own business, being all hot and watery like a young Earth. It's got a sweet magnetic field that's protecting it from cosmic radiation and keeping its atmosphere nice and thick. Hey, life is good. But then, at least 20 asteroids, each the size of a small country, come crashing down on Mars like a giant game of cosmic whack-a-mole. One of them even leaves a crater that's almost 2,000 miles wide. Now imagine how Mars must feel with 2 asteroids being its moons after what other asteroids did to the red planet. All these impacts are like a massive punch to Mars's gut, and its already weak magnetic field is knocked out cold. The core gets all overheated and can't circulate properly, which means no more magnetic field to protect the planet. It's like as if you were wearing nothing at the depth of the Mariana Trench. If it were possible, you'd be defenseless and chilly. It's basically what happened to Mars. So now, poor Mars is out there in the cold, unprotected from all those nasty cosmic rays. It's like going outside without sunscreen, not a good idea. But at least we can learn from Mars's mistakes and make sure Earth doesn't have the same fate. Maybe we should start investing in some asteroid insurance. But trust me, the red planet isn't mean at all. It's actually pretty friendly. While Mars may seem to be pretty tough for Phobos, there's something that might be thriving with Mars's help. So get this, a team of scientists found a way to grow rice on Mars. Yep, you heard me right. They used MMS, not the outdated way to send pictures, but a special soil called Mojave Mars Simulant. It's supposed to mimic Martian soil. And here's the catch, Martian soil has these nasty percolate salts that can be toxic for plants. So the team grew 3 types of rice, 1 normal and 2 gene-edited with mutations that make them better at handling stress like drought or salinity. And guess what? The mutant strains were able to root in soil with 1 gram of percolate per kilometer. Take that, Martian soil. But hold up. The rice grown in the MMS didn't turn out as great as the ones grown in regular potting soil. So the team decided to mix a quarter of the potting soil with the Martian simulant, and looky there, the plants started developing better. Now these scientists aren't just thinking about feeding Martians. They also want to see if their findings can help grow crops in places on Earth with high salinity. And get this, the whole project started when 2 researchers met for coffee and decided to try growing plants together. Well, isn't that nice? I suspect you're about to say, hey, but if you want to grow rice on Mars, you'll have to ship insane amounts of water from Earth, and it's not easy to quench this plant's thirst. You're right. You need about 449 gallons of water to only grow a pound of rice. But guess what? Scientists made a groundbreaking announcement at the Lunar and Planetary Science Conference in Texas. They found a relic glacier near Mars's equator. That's right, water ice on Mars, even near the equator. This is huge news, and could mean there's even more ice just below the surface. It's not just any glacier, it's a relic glacier that's estimated to be 3.5 miles long and up to 2.5 miles wide. It's like the size of a small town. It's got all the features of a glacier, including crevasse fields and moraine bands. But get this, it's not actually ice. It's a salt deposit that formed on top of the glacier while preserving its shape. So, how did this salt deposit form? Well, it turns out that volcanic materials blanketing the region might have something to do with it. When these materials come into contact with water ice, sulfate salts may form and build up into a hardened, crusty layer. Over time, erosion removed the volcanic materials, exposing the sulfates and revealing the glacier's unique features. This glacier is young, likely from the Amazonian geologic period. That means that Mars has had surface ice in recent times. Who knows what other icy secrets Mars is hiding? But hold your horses, there's still more research to be done. Scientists need to figure out if there's still water ice preserved underneath the salt deposit, or if it has disappeared entirely. And if there is still water ice at shallow depths near the equator, that could have major implications for human exploration. Imagine being able to extract water from the ground at a warmer location. That would be a game changer. So let's see what else these scientists uncover about our favorite red neighbor. Maybe someday we'll even get to visit that salt glacier statue in person. See you next time. Now, get this. Octopuses are visitors from outer space. Here's how this would have happened. Ice-kept eggs of octopuses stuck in spatial bodies crashed into Earth. Then these guys would have mixed together with a pre-existing set of genetic information available on our planet. And presto, octopuses were born. Well, it may be a long stretch to justify that the highly intelligent octopuses are extraterrestrial beings. But the idea is based on a theory that has been around since ancient Greece, something known as panspermia. Now, panspermia is a hypothesis that says life exists all around the universe, not only in planets. So, things such as space dust, asteroids, and even spacecraft have their share of life glued to them. And when they travel across the galaxy, life is disseminated. This strand of thought has been polemic, since it goes against the idea that all life originated right here on our planet. But as much as this new octopus theory might be refreshing, it doesn't contribute too substantially to the search for life on other planets. It's just too hypothetical. Now, octopuses are in fact incredibly old. The oldest known fossil belongs to an animal that lived almost 300 million years ago. FYI, this is before our dinosaur buddies roamed the Earth. Wait, there's more! Octopus arms have a mind of their own. That's because 2/3 of their neurons lie in their arms, not in their heads. This means that their arms can problem-solve how to open a shellfish, while their owner is worried about other stuff entirely. Talk about ninja-level multitasking. Oh, and like other animals, such as chimpanzees and dolphins, octopuses have proven to be good at maneuvering tools, like picking up old shells and using them as a temporary home. Now, of course, the most intelligent animals on our planet are humans, according to humans. But we don't seem to give pigs enough credit. Pigs are so smart they can play video games. No, not Minecraft. But in a recent academic study, scientists had 4 pigs play a joystick game. They had to manipulate the stick so that the moving ball would hit the wall and then they would get a treat. All 4 pigs did great in the test, which was surprising even to the scientists. Now, pigeons also aced an impressive test. They were trained to differentiate a Picasso painting from a Monet one, which they had no trouble learning. Then they were able to apply this knowledge, identifying works of art they had not previously seen, meaning they really understood the difference between each painter. Poor things are always seen as a nuisance. Now, if we placed kangaroos in an animal's most amazing ability contest, they'd win. It's mainly because they break the 4-legged rule. A special species of kangaroo, the red kangaroo, uses its tail to help propel it forward. Now, visually, it has 4 limbs, but in practice, it uses 5. They're biologically built to use their tail as a 5th limb, since it's packed with articulated vertebrae and thick muscles. Of course, it had to be an Australian animal. Okay, jokes aside, Australia is home to a variety of unique animals, like the most venomous snake in the world. This not-so-cute reptile is known as the inland taipan, and its venom is enough to take down 100 humans. And still, on the topic of dangerous animals, the island is also home to one of the world's most venomous spiders, the funnel web spider, which can be found not too far away from downtown Sydney. Yikes! The Little Mermaid may have shown us that life is good under the sea, but she didn't mention anything about the bizarre ways of the anglerfish. Anglerfish are those special types of fish that have a huge whip nose connected to the front part of their bodies. They look like they're forever holding a lantern in front of them, except that the little lantern they carry is a type of bioluminescence, and is far from romantic, as anglerfish use it to lure smaller fish in as their meals. It was back in 1999 that scientists discovered that these little guys spend most of their lives upside down. They had never seen anything like that. Hovering above the Pacific Ocean floor at a depth of around 16,400 feet, where light almost doesn't even reach, there they were. They do this because since they live so close to the seafloor, their built-in lantern illuminates the ground in search of food. They might be weird, but they're also pretty clever. Recently, scientists have discovered a species of animal that has neither a brain nor a head and is pretty smart. Meet the brittle star. This 5-armed creature is a bundle of nerves, and it has proved itself to be super clever. In a recent experiment, scientists would dim the light while they fed brittle stars their favorite treat, yummy shrimps. After 10 months of conditioning, these babies would creep out of hiding as soon as the scientists turned off the light in the room they were in. Surely they were expecting to enjoy a delicious meal. Now, we really shouldn't judge a brain by its size, or lack of brain in this case. There's something known as the orange cat behavior, and apparently it's not just a meme. So far, scientists have been able to understand that coat color is connected to a feline's gender. And since orange is an X chromosome, orange cats are usually males, like Garfield. The so-called orange cat behavior describes ginger cats as agents of chaos. Again, pretty much like Garfield. However, there haven't been any conclusive studies on whether coat color and cat behavior are truly linked. In terms of vision, mantis shrimps probably have the most psychedelic vision out of all animals. These funny-looking creatures have a whopping 16 varieties of photoreceptors, with 5 of them reserved for the ultraviolet or UV spectrum. Ultraviolet rays are really short wavelengths, which are invisible to humans. The thing science still doesn't understand is how exactly these mantis shrimp view the world around them. Sure, they can perceive a bunch of colors, but they can't necessarily distinguish all of these colors among themselves. It can be that they just see a lot of really vivid, really blurry colors, but we haven't figured out a way to check that out. Now, to say sloths are cute is an understatement. They may be one of the friendliest animals in the jungle, but there's more. If you look closely at their fur coat, you'll notice hints of green. These greeneries are actually tiny little algae that grow alongside sloths. They help sloths to camouflage better in the jungle, but they also nurture them. The little cracks inside a sloth's fur create the perfect environment for algae reproduction, and scientists have found species of algae that don't exist anywhere else in the world. They do get by with a little help from their friends. Deep within the Sahara Desert, you'll find a little creature known as the fennec fox. This huge-eared animal adapted perfectly to survive in its hostile environment. The huge ears help them to dissipate the unbearable heat of the desert, as well as help them to hunt for underground prey. Now meet this guy. Unlike what its name might suggest, the red panda is closer to a raccoon than it is to a giant panda. You'll find a lot of these cat-sized creatures in the Himalayan region, hopping from tree to tree and bundled together trying to keep warm in the harsh weather. They're gentle and friendly like their big panda cousins, and occasionally enjoy eating some bamboo sticks. And then there are bees. Compared to humans, bees' brains are the size of pinheads, yet they are capable of astounding things. Let's say a bee is running low on energy after a long search flight. This bee desperately needs a drop of honey in order to continue flying, But smartly enough, she doesn't need to go back to the hive to recharge. She can ask a fellow beehive mate for a drop of honey directly from this other bee's stomach and continue flying. This type of decentralized system allows them to build highly effective societies, one that bees don't need to push through the queues in front of the honey cells, for example. Hey, just kidding.
You get the last instructions from the team and get into your spaceship. It's the first spacecraft made on Earth that can move at a speed close to the speed of light. Your task is to visit the most unusual and terrifying places in space and send scientists detailed information about them. And so, your journey begins. Your spacecraft is accelerating, and you dash past the moon. In the distance, you see a small reddish planet. It's Mars. And look at that spectacular giant surrounded by a set of rings. That's Saturn. You wish you could have more time to explore this gas giant, but you have to hurry. You pass by beautiful stars. Some of them are luminous, others have a reddish hue, and some seem to be dimming. That's Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky on Earth. It's about 8.6 light-years away from us, but you're traveling fast, and soon you see Polaris, aka the North Star, which is way further, 431 light-years away. Sometimes you manage to spot tiny dots circling these stars. Those are planets. And then, suddenly, you see nothing. At first, you're horrified. Something has gone wrong, and you've accidentally entered a black hole? Has your equipment malfunctioned? Because it seems that at a distance of 700 million light-years away from Earth, there's a hole. A blank void with no galaxies, stars, planets, or asteroids. You can't see anything. The void is a roughly spherical region of about 330 million light-years across. Our home Milky Way galaxy could fit in there billions of times over. And then it dawns on you. What you're looking at is the mysterious Boötes void. It lies about 700 million light-years away from Earth in the constellation of Boötes, the herdsman driving the plow around the North Pole. At first, this void was called the Great Nothing, but later it was given its current name. Now we know that galaxies look like a giant web. Most of them are parts of long structures called filaments. Those wind through the cosmos, and when they meet, they form regions with a high concentration of galaxies. These regions are what we know as galaxy clusters, but between these clusters and threads, there are ginormous empty voids that hardly contain any galaxies. Such voids actually make up almost 80% of the observable universe, and most of them are huge, from 30 to 300 million light-years wide. The Boötes void is one of the most massive ones. It's even earned the title of supervoid. Astronomers think it might be the result of a few smaller voids merging together. But what could have caused such giant empty areas to appear in the first place? The reason might lie in the origin of the universe. In its early days, all the matter in the universe was packed together quite tightly. Astronomers even think it was something like a uniform soup. But pretty soon, random quantum fluctuations started distributing this matter. Some areas became denser. As a result, their gravitational pull became stronger, and they began stealing matter from less dense regions. This made such areas even denser, and they kept attracting more and more matter. At the same time, smaller clumps of matter started drifting further away from the center, forming galaxies. After staring at nothingness for some time, you decide to explore other space objects and start the engine of your spacecraft again. There's one kind of space formation you've been looking forward to seeing: nebulas. Those are gigantic clouds of gas and dust. With time, gravity starts to pull these clumps of dust and gas together. They grow larger and larger, and their gravity gets more powerful. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? One day, this mass becomes so big that it collapses under its own gravity and forms new stars. So, you decide to visit some of the most beautiful nebulas out there. And you start with the Butterfly Nebula. This butterfly's wingspan is more than 3 light-years. and the structure inside the nebula is one of the most complicated ever observed. The central star, a white dwarf, is heated to an incredible 450,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It means it was formed from a gargantuan star, likely more than 5 times the size of our Sun. The white dwarf is surrounded by a thick disk of dust and gas at the equator. That's what probably makes the whole structure look like an hourglass or a butterfly. The next place you decide to visit is the Eskimo Nebula, 5,000 light-years away from Earth in the constellation of Gemini. It was discovered more than 200 years ago and got its name for a reason. Its double shell formation looks like a person's face hidden in a padded hood of a winter jacket. But in reality, this parka is a disk of material with a ring of comet-shaped objects. And the tails of these objects stream away from the star at the center of the Eskimo Nebula. The bizarre orange streaks in the outer part of the cloud stretch light-years away in all directions. As for the Eskimo's face, even though it resembles a ball of twine, in reality, it's a bubble of material blown into space by the wind of high-speed material produced by the central star. Your next destination is the Ring Nebula. At first sight, it's a giant cloud of dust and gas surrounding an old, almost extinguished star, which does look like a ring. But astronomers say the nebula isn't a bagel, it's a jelly-filled donut. The deep space colorful object more than 2,000 light-years away from Earth is actually a ring that wraps around a blue, ball-shaped structure. Each end of the structure sticks out of the ring's opposite sides. Now you can head to a place called the Pillars of Creation. You find it more than 7,000 light-years away from Earth in the Eagle Nebula. That's a young cluster of stars just 5.5 million years old, space babies. Once, the Hubble Space Telescope managed to take an image of several dark silhouettes near the nebula's center. And now you can see them with your own eyes. Those are the so-called Pillars of Creation, an active star-forming region. And since you've already visited a star-forming region, why don't you drop by a living fossil galaxy? For example, DG-SAT-1. It's as big as the Milky Way, but it's nearly invisible because its stars are spread out incredibly thinly. But what makes the galaxy so unique is that it's sitting all alone, unlike other galaxies of this kind, which are usually found in clusters. It can mean that DG-SAT-1 was formed in a different era, probably a mere 1 billion years after the Big Bang. If it's true, the galaxy is a real living fossil. The next stop on your space sightseeing tour is the Black Widow Pulsar. Just like its spider namesake, this rotating neutron star is munching on its partner, a lightweight brown dwarf star. The more material the pulsar consumes, the more slowly it spins. The energy the neutron star is losing in the process causes the companion star to dwindle. Oh, look at this! That's a stellar nursery in the constellation of Centaurus. But even though this place might be called nursery, it's anything but peaceful or safe. This region, made up of hydrogen and newborn stars, is located in a nebula in the constellation of Centaurus, around 6,500 light-years away from Earth. The intense energy these baby stars emit makes hydrogen clouds glow ominous red. This energy is so powerful that it's eating away dark clouds of dust, and they're disappearing like lumps of butter on a hot frying pan. You're continuing your journey when you see something absolutely amazing, a cloud of water floating in space. To be more precise, it's a cloud of water vapor surrounding a supermassive black hole 12 billion light-years away from Earth. The cloud contains 140 trillion times the entire volume of water on our planet. Astronomers believe this water cloud appeared just 1.6 billion years later than the universe itself.
We still can't find the source of the mysterious signal we've been receiving since 2018. We receive it every 22 minutes and nothing can explain this. Some scientists even believe it could be coming from another civilization we haven't met yet. This strange radio signal wasn't found by a scientist on a serious mission. It was actually discovered by a college student just doing a regular project for school. Tyrone O'Doherty, an undergrad student at Curtin University in Australia, was sifting through old data of the southern sky. He was looking for any weird blinking radio signals. He finally stumbled upon one from 2018 that seemed to shoot radio waves towards Earth like a lighthouse beam. Excited about his find, Tyrone shared it with his mentor, radio astronomer Natasha Hurley-Walker. She dove into researching this signal, hoping for a breakthrough. But despite checking different frequency data, they hit a dead end. But then, Natasha spotted a pattern. The signal repeated every 18 minutes. This was huge. But just as they were gearing up to study it further, poof! The signal vanished after only 3 months, leaving them with nothing. Not giving up, Natasha and her team scanned the skies again, desperate for a clue. Months passed, but nothing turned up. They were ready to give up, and then suddenly, a new signal popped up. This one kept blinking for 5 minutes, then it disappeared. And then it came back exactly 22 minutes later. The main question was if that signal was related to an 18-minute one. To figure it out, Natasha went back to the old radio data from that area. As they dug deeper, they realized that, yes, and these signals aren't anything new. They've been beaming towards Earth for 35 years. Back in 1988, Indian and American telescopes had caught them, but they got buried under tons of other data. This was great news for space explorers because it meant they could now calculate how far away this mysterious object was. After doing the math, they figured out it was incredibly far, even on a space scale, 15,000 light-years from Earth. Now, the only thing left to uncover was what exactly this object was. Walker and his team started comparing it to all the known radio-emitting objects out there. Yet its source remains a mystery. The signals still pop up every 22 minutes on NASA screens, always ending with a frustrating match not found message. The scientists called it J183910. Some think that the signal might come from some extraterrestrial beings. Maybe it's the signal that SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, has been waiting for. This project has been working for over 50 years, trying to find any evidence of life beyond Earth. They also scan the skies for radio waves, laser pulses, and other mysterious signals. So maybe it's a way for extraterrestrial folk to communicate their location. While that idea may sound exciting, we need to be careful about jumping to conclusions. First, we don't have solid proof for that. Before any concrete evidence, it's just speculation. And also, there are other more plausible explanations. Most likely it comes from a natural phenomenon, and there are a couple of theories for that. The first one is the pulsar theory. Imagine a huge star in space much bigger than our Sun. Sometimes these big stars finish their life journeys in a spectacular event called a supernova. When this happens, the star's core collapses, becoming super compact, as if you're squeezing all the stuff from that star into a tiny space. That tiny, super-dense core is called a neutron star. Some of these neutron stars are extra special. We call them pulsars. They get their name because they seem to pulse with energy, like a space lighthouse. These pulsars have incredibly strong magnetic fields, much stronger than what you'd find on Earth. They're like enormous magnets in space. Because of this, they shoot out beams of energy. They're also spinning super fast, so these beams of energy seem to pulse on and off as they spin around. Now, the strange signal we detected seems to have similarities with pulsars, but not quite. Pulsars usually have a predictable lifespan and slow down over time, eventually stopping their radio signals. In contrast, our mysterious signal is quite persistent and is blinking beyond what's expected for pulsars. So, maybe it's not a typical pulsar, or not a pulsar at all. There's also a magnetar theory. Now, a magnetar is another type of neutron star. They're like supercharged versions of pulsars, with even stronger magnetic fields and slightly longer pulsating periods. Maybe this is what causes our signal's intense persistence. However, when we plotted the data, we also realized the signal didn't match the magnetar's vibes either. Magnetars not only send out radio waves, but also powerful X-rays because they're so energetic. But the signal we received was only sending out radio waves. So we figured it's not a pulsar and not a magnetar. The signal's behavior is very strange and suggests an unnatural source. This means there might be something in the universe that scientists haven't fully explored yet. And there is a space object that we don't know much about. The final theory is the so-called dwarf pulsar. Sounds a little dopey to me. Couldn't help myself. Now, a dwarf pulsar is like a star that blinks with light flashes, similar to pulsars, but it takes longer for each blink. Usually, white dwarfs are the leftovers from smaller stars. They don't blink because their magnetic field isn't as strong as pulsars. But when a white dwarf becomes pretty hefty, almost the mass of our Sun, it gets super dense and starts pulsating with a strong magnetic field, just like pulsars. They have a cool quirk. White dwarfs are made of electrons, not neutrons like pulsars. When these charged electrons start dancing with a magnetic field, they shoot out periodic light flashes, which happen every 100 to 1,000 seconds. As you remember, our signal has a period of 22 minutes, 1,320 seconds, a bit longer than the usual white dwarf pulsars, but it's much closer to the truth. So far, this sounds like the most plausible explanation. But even this theory isn't fully confirmed yet. This just shows how much there is in the universe that we're still figuring out. For example, fast radio bursts, another mysterious type of signal we've been detecting. They're like quick, intense bursts of energy in the form of radio waves. They have a ton of energy. FRBs are so powerful that sometimes they can be brighter than entire galaxies. Now, imagine this. They release as much energy in a few milliseconds as our Sun does in 3 whole days. Wow! These bursts happen all over the sky with huge frequencies, although some have been detected with lower frequencies. Every day, we catch around 10,000 random FRBs in the sky. Some of them repeat, but most happen once and disappear forever. Unfortunately, most of them only last for a fraction of a second, and by the time their energy reaches us, it's 1,000 times weaker than a mobile phone signal from the moon. This is why, despite their brightness, there's still a lot we don't understand about them. We're still trying to figure out what causes these FRBs. They could be coming from different sources, like already mentioned magnetars, colliding stars, or even merging galaxies or white dwarfs. As these bursts travel through space, they pick up information about the cosmic environments they pass through, like interstellar gas clouds. It's very unlikely that FRBs are some messages from extraterrestrial beings, though. Not only because there are thousands of them every day all across the sky, but also because we know that the sources of these bursts must be incredibly energetic themselves. Our neighbors would have to have equipment stronger than entire galaxies for that. But the bottom line is, while all these signals are fascinating, there's still a ton to learn about them.
Space, the final frontier. It's a vast and mysterious expanse that has fascinated us for centuries. But as much as we've learned about it, there are still plenty of things that we've been lied to about when it comes to space. Let's take a look at some of the biggest lies we've been told about this topic. First off, we have the idea that space is just this pristine, untouched wilderness. But that's not exactly true. We've been littering space with our debris for decades. Everything from old satellites to rocket parts. In fact, there are over 20,000 pieces of debris orbiting Earth right now, and they're causing all sorts of problems for future space missions. So if you're planning on visiting space anytime soon, watch where you go. You never know what kind of garbage might be floating around. Did you know that the sun is not actually yellow? It's green. Well, kind of. You see, scientists measure the temperature of a star by the color spectrum it emits. Cooler stars appear red, while the hottest of stars look blue. Our sun emits most of its energy at a wavelength that's close to green. But because it emits other wavelengths too, all these colors mix together, and your eyes see this vibrant mixture as white. From Earth, however, the sun looks yellow because our atmosphere is really good at scattering blue light. If our star was actually yellow, Earth would become a frozen rock, and we'd all be polar bears. Plus, the sun isn't on fire for real. It's a big ball of gas, mostly made of hydrogen and helium, and it works more like a gigantic nuclear reactor, constantly fusing hydrogen atoms to create helium inside its core. This process releases enormous amounts of energy. That's why the sun is so hot. Oh, and speaking of setting things on fire, explosions in space aren't real. Sorry, Star Wars fans, a spaceship can't go down in a violent blast because there is no air out there in space. No air means no oxygen, and no oxygen means no fire. Now, you might also think that there are too many stars in the night sky for you to count, but in fact, you can do that. According to the Yale Bright Star Catalog, there are 9,110 stars that you can see from Earth with the unaided eye. So, technically, you can count them, but I wouldn't be surprised if you lost count. And if you're worried about flying through an asteroid belt, don't be. Although it does have trillions of space rocks that range in size from space dust to a quarter of the size of the Moon, they're very spread out. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter is 140 million miles across, which is 1.5 times the distance between Earth and the Sun. This spreads space rocks thousands of miles apart, making it almost impossible for a spacecraft to collide with one. You'll instantly freeze in space without a suit. Nope, you won't turn into a popsicle right away. It's going to take a bit longer than that because heat and cold don't really move very quickly in the vacuum of space. But unfortunately for you, there's a bigger problem at hand. You won't be able to breathe. After just 15 seconds, your brain won't be getting enough oxygen from your blood, and you'll pass out. And then after just 2 minutes, it's curtains for the rest of your organs. So, in short, if you find yourself playing astronaut without a spacesuit, it's game over pretty quickly. Did you know that space doesn't have any temperature at all? That's because the temperature is defined by the speed at which particles move and the amount of energy they have. In the true vacuum of space, there are no particles to move around, making it temperatureless. Of course, some parts of space are really hot, like areas around stars. But the further away you get from stars, the more spread out particles are, making those areas of space pretty chilly. Number 9 is our planet's shape. No, it's not flat, but it's not a perfect sphere either. Yeah, it bulges at the equator because of our planet's wild spin. It's like Earth is doing its own little dance. And because of this bulging, launching spaceships from the equator is much easier than from the poles. Now, when it comes to sound in space, it's a bit of a tricky situation. You might think that no one can hear you scream, but that's not entirely accurate. The thing is, sound needs something to travel through, like air or water. In space, things are super spread out, so all those epic space battles and galactic explosions would be completely silent. Yet there are some places in space with enough particles for sound to travel through. For example, you can hear the black hole at the center of the Perseus galaxy cluster. Another myth is about zero gravity. That's not a thing. There's still some gravity hanging around the International Space Station, about 90% of what we feel on good old Earth. But astronauts get to float around because they're basically free-falling around the planet. And let's be real, Hollywood's version of space travel is not factual. Sure, orbits are a thing, But different altitudes mean different speeds, so moving from one orbit to another isn't exactly a walk in the park. You can't just push yourself in the right direction and hope for the best. You gotta take those orbital velocities into account. This reminded me of the 2013 movie Gravity and how Sandra Bullock tried to survive in space. Hollywood sure added some fuel to these myths. Yet again, who can blame them? Back in 1976, NASA's Viking 1 spacecraft snapped a photo of a curious rock formation on Mars that looked suspiciously like a face. Some folks out there claimed that it must have been proof of extraterrestrial life on the red planet, but NASA had a different take. According to the space agency, the face was nothing more than a bunch of rocks piled up in such a way that the shadows they cast created an illusion of facial features. It turns out it was just a regular hill that got a little too much credit for being photogenic. The solar system stays in place. Lie! It's zooming through space at a speed of 140 miles per second, which means that it's whizzing through the cosmos faster than a cheetah chasing its prey. It takes us 230 million years for the solar system to complete a full orbit around the Milky Way. It's a good thing it isn't getting a speeding ticket, because that would be one astronomical fine. Eh? Without the sun, planets would be pretty chilly. We're talking about temperatures as low as -455 degrees Fahrenheit. Brr. But with the sun around, the planets get to enjoy much more livable temperatures. Of course, not all planets are created equal. Mercury, for example, is the closest to the sun. Venus, on the other hand, is farther away, but somehow manages to be even hotter than Mercury. The distance from the sun isn't the only factor that affects a planet's temperature. Other things like the planet's size and reflectivity also come into play. So Mercury being the hottest planet in our solar system is a false proposition. No, just because it's the closest one to the sun doesn't mean it's the hottest. Even though we've been deceived in some ways, that doesn't make space any less amazing. It's still a vast, beautiful, and utterly fascinating part of our universe. And there's still so much we have yet to discover. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll really discover little green people out there. Or maybe we'll find out something even more incredible. Until then, we'll just have to keep dreaming and exploring. There, you got 14 things on our list. Do you have any other space myths to debunk?
Hi, my name is Martin. I am the author of this channel, and today I'll tell you all about the evidence of astronauts meeting with unidentified things at the time of observation. It's the year 1962, and American John Glenn is orbiting Earth in his Friendship 7 capsule on the Mercury Atlas 6 flight. He looks out of the window and sees fireflies.
Well, maybe those are not fireflies, but he clearly sees some weird bright specks clustered around the ship. Unsurprisingly, he tries to find a logical explanation. Can they be ice crystals from the spacecraft's hydrogen peroxide attitude control rockets? But Glenn is unable to correlate their appearance with the use of the rockets. The mystery remains unsolved.
Only much later will we find out what those fireflies were. You see, spaceships tend to accumulate clouds of debris and contamination around themselves. And when Glenn's rockets sprayed jets of crystals, many of these crystals accumulated in the cloud. They reflected sunlight and interacted with other gases, looking like tiny sparkles. The case of the mysterious fireflies is now officially solved.
But it isn't the darkest space tale. One of the most famous cases of seeing bizarre stuff in space comes from Apollo 11. That's when Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins noticed a UFO pacing along with them during their flight to the moon. That's how the astronauts described this incident. We did watch a slow blinking light some substantial distance away from us. There was something out there, close enough to be observed. The period of uncertainty was rather brief. The astronauts and ground control soon identified the object. It was one of the 4 adapter panels that fit between the 3rd stage and the lunar module. These panels were ejected from the third stage, and one of them continued along the same trajectory as the lunar module with the crew. While moving, it rotated and blinked when sunlight was reflected off its surface.
Another famous and truly creepy picture hinting at the presence of alien life on the moon was taken by the crew of Apollo 16.
As the astronauts were leaving our natural satellite, they made a video, and 4 seconds of it showed a near-perfect Hollywood flying saucer leaving behind a plasma trail. For more than 30 years, enthusiasts used this video to prove that aliens had paid us a visit.
But then, scientists decided to take the matter into their own hands. They realized that, when viewed from the window through which the video had been taken, the object in the film was actually consistent with a small floodlight sticking out from the side of the capsule on a boom.
Look, from this angle, the floodlight looks exactly like a flying saucer. And the boom, indeed, looks like that plasma trail. And do you see this? Those are a couple of bolts on the boom.
Another report that inspired UFO enthusiasts came from Gemini 7. Astronauts Frank Borman and Jim Lovell were making what was called a football maneuver. It was supposed to get them into a position where they would make recurring close approaches with their Titan II booster stage every orbit.
But when they were performing this maneuver, Barman reported bogey at 10 o'clock high. We have several, looks like debris, up here, actual sighting. We also have the booster in sight. Yeah, have very, very many. Look like hundreds of little particles banked on the left out about 3 to 4 miles. It looks like a path to the vehicle at 90 degrees. They are past now. They were in polar orbit. Lovell claimed that the booster was in sight too, slowly tumbling along with the debris cloud. Does it mean that Bogman's bogey particles couldn't have been the booster or booster debris? After all, they were moving in a different direction, traveling along a different trajectory. Well, not necessarily. Later analysis showed that those particles were ice flakes from leftover fuel from the Titan II.
As you see, astronauts often report seeing weird stuff out there, but NASA's reaction is often anticlimactic. Let's have a look at how they commented on the statements of an astronaut who claimed to have witnessed alien presence in space.
NASA doesn't track UFOs. NASA is not involved in any sort of cover-up of alien life on this planet or anywhere else in the universe.
We should also remember that unidentified doesn't necessarily mean positively identified as an alien spacecraft. There's a lot of objects in orbit, and a lot of stuff travels along every mission. So, we'll always have UFO reports as long as we have space programs. Hi everyone! Today we'll be talking about the controversial music that astronauts once heard in space. A few years ago, NASA made public the recording of a bizarre music that the astronomers from Apollo 10 reported hearing in May 1969, while they were flying over the far side of the moon. At that moment, they were out of radio contact with Earth. This happened months before the first astronaut set foot on the lunar surface. There were 3 people on board: Thomas Stafford, John Young, and Eugene Cernan. The sounds lasted for about an hour. Astronomers managed to record them and transmit them to Mission Control in Houston. Now, I want you to listen to these whistling sounds.
That music even sounds outer spacey, doesn't it? You hear that? That whistling sound? Yeah.
Don't they resemble some kind of otherworldly outer space music? So the question is, could the astronauts have heard alien music coming from outer space? Well, there's another more simple, non-alien involving explanation for this cosmic phenomenon, but we'll talk about it a bit later. In the audio recording from the Apollo 10 mission, astronaut Eugene Cernan, who was piloting the lunar module, could be heard asking John Young, piloting the command module, if he could hear that whistling sound. Cernan was the first one to call these sounds music and to add that they were kinda outer spacey. Later, when the 2 astronauts asked Tom Stafford, who was in the lunar module with Cernan, if he could hear the sounds too, he confirmed it and stated that they were really weird. Young suggested they should find out more about them. Nobody will believe us, he added. Apollo 10 was a mission that paved the way for Apollo 11. which landed 2 humans on the lunar surface. The Apollo 10 astronauts flew to the moon in a command module. However, 2 of the crew members also had a ride in the lunar module, which allowed them to drop down to less than 10 miles above the moon's surface. So, since they managed to approach our natural satellite so closely, could they have heard something coming from the lunar surface? Well, apparently not. Turns out that the creepy whistling sound was nothing more than some interference between the VHF radios on the 2 different vehicles. Interestingly enough, Apollo 11 astronaut Michael Collins later wrote in his book, Carrying the Fire, that NASA technicians had warned him about the whistling. He also mentioned that if he hadn't known about the origins of this music, it would have scared him to no end. In 2008, NASA shared the transcripts of the Apollo 10 transmission, but according to the documents themselves, they were declassified in 1982. In 2012, NASA also shared the audio files online. If you listen to these files, you'll hear that the astronauts sound sincerely awed and puzzled by what they hear. Moreover, they bring it up over and over again. It's also worth mentioning that you never actually feel that the 3 men were panicked or alarmed while going over the transcript or the audio. Some sources put particular emphasis on the fact that the space music started when the astronauts were over the far side of the moon. They didn't have radio or visual contact with mission control for about an hour, something that had been expected. Some documentaries used this moment to create tension by saying things like, the astronauts were on their own, no one on Earth could see or hear them. However, the narrators never explained why the astronauts' isolation could have been such a significant factor. By no means was it connected to the not-so-mysterious sounds undersourced. There's another interesting element to this story that we should consider though, and it's the fact that Apollo 10 astronauts never discussed this incident and the sounds publicly. However, it's still unclear whether they talked about it with NASA engineers. This makes some people speculate that the astronauts didn't want to project anything but a rock-hard psyche. Showing a drop of confidence even once during the whole mission could have left them out of the whole project.
Hey, ever wondered what's bigger than infinity? Infinity plus 1? Nope. It's not even infinity times infinity. But indeed, there are situations in which one infinity can be bigger than another infinity. I hope I haven't confused you yet. First of all, we've got set theory. That's when you take a group of something and put it into a defined set. For example, 5 pencils. But it can actually be anything. It doesn't matter. What matters is there is stuff in the set. Okay, you might be wondering, how can it help me understand infinity? Let's try to somehow define the size of the set. Well, it's easy to understand that the size of a set of finite elements is simply the number of these elements. But how should we think about the size of infinite sets? Oh, let me introduce correspondence to you. This is a concept in set theory that functions by relating one individual object in one set to another individual object in another set. These individual objects can be some items or just numbers. The main thing is that each item in one set can be compared to an item in another set. For example, 2 pencils to 2, 4 pencils to 4, and so on. We cannot compare the sizes of infinite sets, but we can define correspondence between elements. And if 2 given sets have a 1-to-1 correspondence between their elements, then these 2 sets have the same cardinality. Roughly speaking, the word cardinality means numbers of elements. If the cardinality of some infinite set is equal to the cardinality of the natural numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we call the power of this set Aleph 0. Let's stop here for a moment and do some math. Do you still remember our main question? Right. How can one type of infinity be smaller than another? But what if we use 2 different sets of counting numbers, which are also called natural, and imagine that both these sets extend forever? Set A, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Set B, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. As you see, set B starts one number higher than set A. But we have 1-to-1 correspondence between sets. It means that they represent equal types of infinities. In other words, each number in set A corresponds to another number in set B that is one value higher 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, etc. Now this is the smallest type of infinity, the very Aleph null. Okay, another question remains. Why isn't infinity, let it be Aleph null plus 1 bigger than good old Aleph null? Well, here's another example. This person is a cyclist. We take his bike, use it as a +1, and put it in set A. Now, our sets look like this. Set A, bike, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Set B, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Following the logic, we match the bike to 1, 1 to 3, 3 to 4, and so on. As you see, it's possible to keep this one-to-one correspondence between the sets, and it can go on forever. It means that infinity and infinity +1 indeed have the same cardinality. But wait, it gets even weirder. Picture building a set using only natural numbers ending in 0, 10, 20, 30, etc. Then you compare it to the set with all the natural numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. At first glance, it seems that the second set should be 10 times larger than the first one. But as far as the set theory is concerned, these two sets are equal. Amazing, isn't it? Then how can any infinity be bigger than another one? To figure it out, we need to enter the world of real numbers, which are any numbers representing a quantity along a continuous line. It can be 59, 4.335,081 pi, any fraction that comes to your mind, and so on. Imagine 2 points on a line. Between these very finite points, there's an uncountable and infinite set of numbers. Long story short, just trust us that mathematicians can prove that it's impossible to create a one-to-one correspondence between natural numbers and every possible real number. Here you go. With the help of sets, we've found an infinity which is bigger than the infinity Aleph null.
If you've ever wondered about what a black hole consists of, you're in the right place at the right time. I bet you've heard of this first one, the event horizon, and it's exactly what makes a black hole. Well, black. We could probably think of the event horizon as the boundary of no return. Once you cross the event horizon, the velocity you need to escape the clutches of the black hole is already higher than the speed of light. So, whatever passes the event horizon, be it light or any object, is doomed to stay inside. And since light can't get out from behind the event horizon, black holes neither emit nor reflect it. Nothing about what happens to them can reach an outside observer. But wait, then how did we get these beautiful photos of black holes? The thing is, we observe not the black holes themselves, but the light emitted by the matter surrounding them and forming a structure called an accretion disk. That's the main light source of black holes. For example, look at this stellar mass black hole. It's paired with a star and is pulling gas from it. Supermassive black holes do the same, but they munch on stars that stray too close. Eventually, all this stolen gas settles into an insanely hot, bright, and rapidly spinning disk. Matter is working its way from the outer edges of the disk toward its inner sides. Once it reaches the edge, it falls into the event horizon. If you looked at an accretion disk from up close, you'd see that it has a rather funny shape when viewed from some angles. That's because the gravitational field of the black hole warps space-time, the very fabric of the universe, and light travels along curved lines. The clever word for this process is gravitational lensing. The light that comes from the top of the accretion disk behind the black hole seems to form a hump above it. You can notice it in this image, see? And the light from beneath the far side of the disk creates another hump below as it takes a different path. But the coolest thing, if you looked at the disk exactly face on, you wouldn't notice any humps whatsoever. Then we've got the event horizon shadow. This is a dark zone which is around twice as big as the black hole's actual surface. The shadow is created by the combination of two effects. First, the event horizon captures all the light passing through it, and second, the curved space-time around the event horizon causes light to be redirected through gravitational lensing. Let's move on to the next part of the black hole, and it's a photon sphere. Do you see these thin rings of light that appear at the edge of the black hole shadow? They're actually numerous, highly distorted images
of the accretion disk. Here, light from the disk orbits the black hole multiple times before escaping. The closer to the black hole, the thinner and fainter the rings are. There's also another visual phenomenon known as Doppler beaming. From most angles, one side of the accretion disk always looks brighter than the other. That's because near the black hole, the disk spins so fast that light streaming from the part of it spinning toward us becomes bluer and brighter, while light from the side of the disk rotating away from us becomes redder and dimmer. Next, you've probably heard that our sun has something known as the corona. Well, the black hole has one too, and it's one of the most extreme environments in the universe. Some scientists claim that powerful magnetic fields threading the inner accretion disk extend out and create a turbulent billion-degree cloud. Particles in the corona hypothetically orbit the black hole at speeds approaching the speed of light. Some experts believe that the corona might be a source of ultra-high energy X-rays, but we still don't know much about them. Plus, these coronas themselves can appear and disappear, following some patterns only they are aware of, which makes them even more mysterious. And finally, according to the theory of general relativity, the center of the black hole contains a point where matter is crushed to infinite density. This point is the final destination of anything falling into the event horizon, and it's called singularity. At the moment, astronomers aren't sure whether it's a physical structure or a purely mathematical one.
A Dyson sphere is a theoretical megaproject, a ginormous sphere encircling a star with platforms orbiting in tight formation. It's supposed to be an ultimate solution both for energy production and living space. The creators of a Dyson sphere get a lot of surface area for habitation and the ability to catch every tiny bit of solar radiation and heat produced by their central star. The first person to theorize about such a bizarre construction was British-American theoretical physicist Freeman Dyson. According to him, an intelligent extraterrestrial civilization could consider building this sphere after colonizing some moons and planets in their local stellar neighborhood. With the growth of their population, these aliens would need more and more energy to sustain their lives. Dyson calculated that assuming that this alien society grew at 1% per year, their area and energy needs would become 1 trillion times larger in a mere 3,000 years. And if their solar system contained a space body similar in size to Jupiter, they could take it apart and spread its mass in a spherical shell. By building a structure at twice the distance between our planet and the sun, this amount of material would be sufficient to build a huge number of orbiting platforms. Each of them could be 6 to 10 feet thick, which would basically allow this civilization to live on their star-facing surfaces. A shell this thick could be comfortably habitable and capable of holding all the equipment needed for using solar radiation without falling onto the star from the inside. But after absorbing all this solar energy, the sphere would have to re-radiate it. Otherwise, the energy would build up, eventually causing the construction to melt. It means that the light of a star wrapped in a Dyson sphere would look dimmed or even completely darkened, depending on how dense the platforms orbiting it were. At the same time, it would glow unusually bright in infrared wavelengths invisible to the unaided eye. Because of this infrared radiation, Dyson spheres are classified as a type of technosignature. It's a sign of activity that astronomers can use to discover intelligent life forms in the universe. Some Earth-based researchers have infrared maps of the night sky they examine in hopes of spotting Dyson spheres. So far, no one has ever found one. However, one study has selected several Dyson sphere candidates. Its authors have processed large amounts of information using a special data pipeline for combining and analyzing information. One of the main search criteria is the detection of excessive infrared radiation. At the same time, it's important to distinguish this radiation from that emitted by natural objects. After a complicated filtering of millions of objects, the researchers identified 7 potential Dyson spheres. Sure, further analysis is needed to determine their nature. To do this, scientists want to use optical spectroscopy, which may reveal more details about these objects and their origins. At the same time, the researchers admit that these candidate Dyson spheres might have other explanations. For example, they could be debris disks or protoplanetary disks of young stars. Only more research can show whether we can find traces of other civilizations among star systems. For now, it's still an open question. Interestingly, Dyson spheres have been spoken about a lot in science fiction. As far back as 1937, a novel called Star Maker by Olaf Stapledon described systems in one particular galaxy that were surrounded by a gauze of light traps, which focused solar energy for intelligent use. That was the reason why the entire galaxy was dimmed. In another novel, Ring World, the writer spoke about a ring-shaped artificial structure surrounding a star.
Imagine living in a world where technology has reached its highest point. Your daily routines are orchestrated by an AI, which anticipates your every need, from brewing your morning coffee to selecting a perfect evening outfit. The cityscape outside the window of your floating home is a marvel of efficiency. Flying pods whisk people to their destinations. Renewable energy sources power the giant megacity, creating an environment of pristine streets and clean air. At work, you have online meetings with colleagues living across galaxies, collaborating on projects that go beyond our current understanding. It sounds like a sci-fi story, but some extraterrestrial civilization might have already reached this level of development. Scientists started pondering the possibility of life beyond Earth long ago. They've been wondering what such life could look like and how humans could identify it from afar. This train of thought led to the development of several classification systems, including one called the Kardashev scale. It was proposed in 1964. This classification evaluates hypothetical alien civilizations based on how much energy they are able to harness. According to the scale, there are 3 types of civilizations. The first type is a technological level close to the current level of Earth. Type 2 is a civilization capable of harnessing the energy emitted by its own star. And the third type is a civilization that has learned to use the energy of an entire galaxy. This scale sure caught people's imagination. It was included in a 5-page paper called Transmission of Information by Extraterrestrial Civilizations. This work focuses on calculating how powerful a light signal from any point of the universe should be for us to detect it. Now, within the basic categories, humans are a Type 1 civilization on the Kardashev scale. But some experts claim we aren't even a 1, since we haven't managed to harness the equivalent of the entire energy of Earth. This makes us more like 0.7, and of course, we're far from being a 2, a civilization with a working Dyson sphere. A Dyson sphere is a theoretical mega-engineering project encircling a star with platforms that are orbiting it in a tight formation. It might be the ultimate solution for living space and energy production. With its help, the creators of this ginormous construction could have loads of surface area for living and the ability to capture every tiny bit of solar radiation produced by their main star. As for a Type 3 civilization, it extracts fusion and exotic energy, information, and raw materials directly from their galaxy. This civilization is capable of space travel via wormholes, intergalactic communication via subspace, and galaxy-scale influence. They have supreme access to energy and are spread all over the universe. After millions of years of evolution, a Type 3 civilization may actually be AI superintelligences. Androids, cyborgs, and humans may be considered subspecies in such a highly advanced galactic society. In the most hopeful scenario, humans would have found a way to coexist with their AI masters. Or there might be no humans in that world whatsoever. This civilization might have already ascended into beings of pure energy. capable of controlling and directing machines to carry out all kinds of work. Now, back to the Kardashev scale. Even though it focuses only on technosignatures, it acknowledges biosignatures too, suggesting that each search should inform the other. The discovery of the simplest organism, for example, on one of Saturn's moons, could increase the probability that many Type II civilizations exist in our galaxy. At the moment, SETI is the main player in the field of looking for extraterrestrial civilizations. It's a combined effort of enthusiast scientists who focus on receiving and analyzing signals from space in the radio and visible light regions of the electromagnetic spectrum. It's looking for non-random patterns that have been likely sent deliberately by technologically advanced beings. The first modern SETI search was Project OMA in 1960. It used a radio telescope in Green Bank, Virginia. SETI uses targeted searches concentrating on groups of nearby sun-like stars.
According to the theory of panspermia, life could have been brought to Earth by a meteorite, comet, or asteroid from a different region of space. At the moment, this idea remains purely theoretical. But let's figure out if it could actually turn out to be true. Traditionally, exobiologists, those who are focused on searching for life outside Earth, have been trying to explore the possibility of life on Mars or in the subsurface oceans of Saturn's and Jupiter's icy moons. But simple life could be much more widespread. It could be drifting through interplanetary space right now, in the form of dormant bacteria and spores. Several scientists have noted that the ultra-harsh environment of space is likely to severely damage the DNA and RNA of such spores and microorganisms. Others believe that since enough microbes could be traveling in a dust cloud, some of them could survive in their original form. There are several types of panspermia. For example, lithopanspermia proposes that some kind of microbic life could exist in debris blasted into the cosmos after planetary collisions with comets and asteroids. Radiopanspermia claims that organisms might be able to travel through space with the help of radiation coming from stars. But in this case, it's unclear how the effect of dangerous ultraviolet and X-ray radiation, combined with the vacuum of space, doesn't totally destroy microorganisms. There's also pseudopanspermia. According to it, organic building blocks of life appear in interstellar clouds of dust. They get transported to the surfaces of planets, and life starts developing there. It sounds really fascinating, but is there any evidence for the panspermia theory? Well, there have been a few orbital experiments. For example, from 2008 to 2016, the samples gathered by EXPOSE, special equipment mounted outside the International Space Station and dedicated to astrobiology, were exposed to the conditions of space. After that, they were returned to Earth from the ISS. It turned out that some of them had survived those severe conditions. There was even a case when 100% of bacterial spores placed in Mars-like conditions were still capable of life. Also, some seeds survived and were later grown as plants on Earth. There have also been exostack experiments on the U.S. Long-Duration Exposure Facility satellite and biopan experiments on Russian photon capsules. They have shown that with minimal protection, spores, lichens, and even minuscule animals, such as tardigrades, might be able to survive in space for as long as several years. A piece of Surveyor 3 lunar lander was brought back to Earth in 1969 by the Apollo 12 mission. Shockingly, it contained an Earth bacterium that had survived unprotected for more than 2 years on the airless surface. At the same time, this bacterium could have come from laboratory contamination on arrival back on Earth. The Indian Space Research Organization carried out a search for space microorganisms too. It was done at stratospheric altitudes via balloon flights. The results showed that living interplanetary cells existed in air samples taken from heights of above 25 miles. Normally, air from lower levels of the atmosphere can't be transported there, so this discovery seemed to prove the theory of panspermia. But in 2010, NASA atmospheric sampling before and after hurricanes proved that under certain circumstances, Earth bacteria could actually be transported very high into the upper levels of the atmosphere. One of the main arguments against panspermia is that if this theory was correct, all life found throughout the solar system would have a common origin and share main biochemical characteristics like genetic code. It doesn't sound plausible. Many specialists believe that only the presence of astronaut explorers on the surfaces of, let's say, Mars, Europa, or Enceladus can properly solve the question of life in the solar system. They can compare any life forms found with Earth-type life, which can turn out to be a real test of panspermia. In any case, until probes finally find direct proof of spaceborne life, the panspermia theory will remain unproven.
Lisa Marie Nowak was born in 1963 in Washington, D.C. She has always been fascinated by space. She entered the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis and, years later, graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Aerospace Engineering. In 1996, Nowak's dream came true. She was picked to be an astronaut at the Johnson Center in Houston. She qualified as a mission specialist in robotics. Lisa went on her first mission in July 2006 aboard the Space Shuttle Discovery. She was a mission flight engineer. She spent nearly 2 weeks in space. But despite all her achievements, Nowak is best known for a single night in February 2007 when she took a 900-mile trip to confront her ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend. And of the things that attracted the public's attention most was the fact that Lisa allegedly made the whole journey wearing diapers to avoid pit stops. Later, though, the story was denied by Nowak's attorney. Not much is actually known about the exact nature of the relationship between Nowak and William Orphalin. Lisa told the police that it was more than a working relationship but less than a romantic one. After all, Nowak was married to her husband Richard for 19 years. They had 3 children, and when she was arrested, her son was a teenager, and her twin daughters were just 5 years old. It all started in January 2004, when Nowak participated in an 11-day weather survival training course in Canada with her fellow astronauts. One of them was William. After 4 days of instruction with the Canadian Armed Forces, they were dropped off in the wilderness and had to make their way back on foot. After covering 12 miles, they completed the course on January 29. Nowak worked together with Orphalin. Apparently they became close, and when they returned to Houston, the astronauts began an extramarital affair, which they tried to hide. Both of them were serving Navy officers, so they could be charged with conduct unbecoming an officer and a gentleman. And still, in February 2005, Orphalin's wife discovered emails between her husband and Nowak and filed for divorce. In May, their divorce was finalized, and William moved to a small apartment. He gave Lisa a key, and she often came there, becoming a familiar sight to other residents of the complex. Sometime later, Lisa's relationship with Orphalin cooled, but she kept calling him almost every day. And then, in late 2006, Orphalin started a relationship with U.S. Air Force Captain Colleen Shipman. William told Lisa about this news in January. He was sure Nowak took it well, and they could remain friends. Spoiler, it was just his wishful thinking. The ex-lovers continued to train for a charity bicycle ride until Shipman became uncomfortable with Nowak's bike being kept in William's apartment and asked the man to tell Lisa to remove it. Clearly, Nowak didn't like it. Using her key, she entered William's apartment and found romantic emails Orphalin and Shipman exchanged. She didn't take it well, and since she also discovered Shipman's travel plans in the emails, she decided to make a journey to Orlando and confront her rival. On February the 4th, 2007, Nowak packed a black wig, latex gloves, a BB pistol and necessary ammunition, pepper spray, a hooded tan trench coat, black gloves, a drilling hammer, an 8-inch folding knife, and other stuff, and drove her husband's car 900 miles from Houston to Orlando. The next day, she appeared at the Orlando National Airport and waited for around half an hour until Shipman's plane touched down. Shipman's suitcase, though, didn't arrive. At the baggage claim office, she was told that it would be delivered on the next flight, almost 2 hours later. So, she was given a $12 food and drink voucher. She spent some time at the airport and finally got her things. After that, she took a shuttle bus to the parking area. Interestingly, upon arrival, Shipman felt as if she was being watched. She also knew someone was following her to an airport satellite parking area. When she got into her car, rushing footsteps behind her back made her react quickly and lock the door. Nowak ran up to the car and slapped the window. She was wearing a wig and dark glasses, so Shipman didn't recognize her. Nowak asked for a ride, saying that she was afraid to stay outside all alone. Then she started crying. Shipman couldn't hear her well, so she opened the window just a bit. That's when Nowak sprayed pepper spray into the car. Shipman reacted lightning fast, driving off to the parking lot booth and calling the police. When a few Orlando Police Department Airport Division officers arrived, they saw Nowal disposing of a bag at a parking bus stop. The woman was arrested on charges of attempted kidnapping, battery, attempted vehicle burglary, and destruction of evidence. Shipman claimed that Nowak had been stalking her for 2 months, so citing evidence of careful planning, weapons, and disguises, police recommended Nowak be held without bail. Still, Lisa was to be released on $15,500 bail. She was obliged to wear a GPS tracking device and not contact Shipman in any way. But even before Nowak could be freed, Orlando police charged her with a much more severe crime: attempted first-degree murder. It was announced that she wouldn't be released on bail. Only after the bail was raised by $10,000 was she allowed to leave jail. Meanwhile, Shipman dropped her request for a protection order on February 15th. Nowak was placed on a 30-day leave by NASA. When Lisa returned to Houston on a commercial airline flight, she was immediately taken under police escort to the Johnson Space Center for medical and psychiatric evaluation. The woman's assignment to NASA as a serving Navy officer was terminated by her agency on the 7th of March, 2007. Her arrest caused quite a stir, making the public question NASA's astronaut selection and screening processes. In April, more material on the case was revealed. New documents described the items found in Nowak's car after her arrest. Among them, there was a handwritten note listing Shipman's flight info and another note with more than 24 items, including sneakers, plastic gloves, cash, umbrella, black sweats, and others. A floppy disk was another thing found in the car. It contained 2 photos of Nowak riding in a bicycle race and 15 images of an unidentified woman. Before all this happened, a feline had given Nowak a cell phone so that she could communicate with him at any time. Phone records showed that she had called him at least 12 times and sent 7 text messages the day he had returned from his space shuttle flight on the 22nd of December, 2006. During December and January, more than 100 calls were made, but it was unclear who called whom. When questioned by NASA and military investigators, Oefelein explained that he had broken off the relationship with Nowak. At the same time, he still had lunch with her in his apartment, at least once in January. And they kept training for that bicycle race. And they went to the gym together. Nowak and her husband Richard divorced in June 2008, and Lisa was given full custody of their 3 children. In November 2009, Nowak entered a guilty plea to felony burglary and battery as part of a plea deal. She was sentenced to a year's probation with no jail time. In March 2011, Nowak petitioned the court to seal the record of her criminal proceedings. She claimed it was harming her family and her livelihood. Her request was granted. As for Oefelein and Shipman, they got married sometime later. Many people found Nowak's story fascinating. It has been adapted for TV, and in 2019, the movie Lucy in the Sky saw the light of the day. It was loosely based on Nowak's story.
A giant volcano has been found near Mars's equator. It was literally hiding in plain sight. It's deeply eroded but active from ancient to recent times. There might even be remnants of glacier ice near its base. That's why this discovery might indicate a promising new location to search for life, as well as a potential destination for future human and robotic exploration. The discovery of a giant volcano and a possible sheet of hidden glacier ice was announced at the 55th Lunar and Planetary Science Conference in Texas. The volcano is located in the eastern part of Mars' Tharsis volcanic province.
between Labyrinth of the Night and Valleys of Mariner. The formation was actually repeatedly spotted by spacecraft orbiting Mars, but it's so deeply eroded that it was hard to recognize it for what it really was. The structure is still awaiting its official name. At the moment, it's referred to as the Noctis volcano. It reaches a height of 29,600 feet and spans an impressive 280 miles across. Such a giant size indicates that the volcano has been active for a very long time. In its southeastern part, there's a thin, recent volcanic deposit, and beneath, glacier ice might still be present. Scientists were examining the geology of the area where they had spotted the remains of a glacier the year before when they realized they were inside a volcano. Several clues gave away the volcanic origin of the eroded structure. For example, the area of the central summit has a few elevated mesas forming an arc. It reaches the highest point and then slopes downhill from the summit. The outer slopes extend out to 140 miles in different directions. The remains of a collapsed volcanic crater that used to host a lava lake are located near the center of the structure. Lava flows and deposits made of volcanic ash, cinders, pumice, and rock fragments ejected during eruptions, as well as hydrated mineral deposits, appear in several spots within the structure. In addition to the volcano, a large area of volcanic deposits within the volcano's perimeter has been found, too. It covers an area of 1,930 square miles and contains loads of low, rounded, elongated, blister-like mounds. Such terrain is believed to be a field of rootless cones, mounds produced by explosive steam venting or steam swelling. It happens when a thick cover of hot volcanic materials happens to rest on a water or ice-rich surface. The Noctis volcano seems to have a long and complicated history of modifications. They might have occurred because of the combination of fracturing and thermal and glacial erosion. Researchers believe the volcano could be a vast shield made of layers of pyroclastic materials, lava, and ice. The latter might have appeared due to snow and glaciers accumulating on the volcano's flanks through time. Eventually, fractures and faults developed in the region, probably due to the uplift of the Tharsis region on which the volcano sits. Lava started to rise through various parts of the volcano. It led to thermal erosion and the removal of huge amounts of hidden ice. Entire sections of the volcano collapsed. Glaciers continued the erosion process, giving the numerous canyons crisscrossing the structure their peculiar shape. If this version is correct, then possible hidden sheets of glacier ice around the volcano might be the remains of the latest glaciation that impacted the Noctis volcano. And still, a lot about the newly discovered formation remains a mystery. It's obvious that it has been active for a long time and started to grow early in Mars's history, but it's unclear when exactly. Even though it erupted even in modern times, it's unknown if it's still volcanically active. Will it erupt again when people begin to colonize the red planet? And finally, if it has been active for a very long time, is it possible for the combination of constant warmth and water from ice to allow the site to harbor life?
Black holes are massive, the densest objects in the universe. They have such a great mass that their gravitational pull doesn't let anything, even light, escape their clutches. But in this terrifying world of black holes, there are monsters that are in a league of their own. Recently, astronomers discovered a black hole that is 33 billion times as heavy as our Sun. This space giant sits at the center of a supergiant elliptical galaxy called Abell 1201, which is located 2.7 billion light-years away from our planet. This black hole is so large it was given a rare designation, an ultra-massive black hole. No wonder. It's more than 8,000 times heavier than the supermassive black hole at the center of our home Milky Way galaxy. This ultramassive black hole was the first one to be discovered with the help of gravitational lensing. This method is based on the fact that very massive objects such as galaxies bend the light from a more distant object, magnifying it. A great thing about this method of research is that it allows astronomers to study inactive black holes too. It could help us detect loads of new black holes beyond our universe. That's what the area surrounding our galaxy is called. Probably it would help us find some exotic objects we've never seen before. Now, let's speak about another awesome instrument that efficiently helps us explore space, the James Webb Space Telescope. When it stares at young galaxies, which would look like mere red specks to you, it sees an astonishing number of cyclones churning at their centers. Those are black holes. Interestingly, giant black holes were believed to be big players in early cosmic history. But James Webb regularly finds an unexpected number of these beasts. For example, using the telescope, astronomers have detected a supermassive black hole from when our universe was less than 600 million years old. In universe terms, it's just a baby. This is the most distant actively feeding supermassive black hole ever observed. It's located at the heart of its host galaxy called Sears 1019. The black hole is surprisingly small and not massive at all. It's actually one of the smallest found in the early universe. It's equal to approximately 9 million suns. It might sound like a lot, but in reality, supermassive black holes tend to grow to billions of times the mass of our star. There's another unusual thing about this find, and scientists are having a hard time trying to explain it. You see, it's supposed to take way longer than 600 million years for a supermassive black hole to grow to its full potential. The development happens when a black hole either feasts on surrounding matter or merges with a larger black hole. Even black holes similar to the one at the center of our Milky Way galaxy, which is almost 4.3 million times the mass of our Sun, are supposed to be seen in the more recent universe. Actually, scientists have long suspected that supermassive black holes probably existed in the early universe. But this theory has been proven only thanks to the JWST and its infrared eye. It's shown that the black hole Sears 1019 is actively munching on all the matter it can lay its hands on. Such feeding black holes are usually surrounded by swirls of gas and dust, falling inside them, called accretion disks. The gravitational force of a black hole heats this matter, and it makes the disk shine. And that's not all. Extra strong magnetic fields produced in this process channel the matter to the poles of the black hole. From time to time, this matter is released into space in twin, powerful jets. They move at a speed that is close to the speed of light, which generates incredibly bright light. Astronomers were watching the galaxy hosting the unusual old black hole as part of the Cosmic Evolution Early Release Since survey. They saw the galaxy as it was when our 13.8 billion-year-old universe was just 570 million years old. Besides the super old black hole, scientists spotted two other ones. Those probably appeared 1 and 1.1 billion years after the Big Bang. They also discovered 11 ancient galaxies that existed between 470 and 675 million years after the beginning of cosmic history. Now, how about having a look at the biggest black holes astronomers have found so far and finding out what would happen to Earth if one of them was to enter the solar system? NGC 6166 is a monster that has grown to have a mass of 30 billion solar masses. It's an elliptical galaxy that has an active nucleus at the center. It's also one of the most luminous sources of X-rays. The galaxy's supermassive black hole powers two symmetric radio jets in the opposite direction, which is the result of the infall of gas into its center. Another peculiar thing about NGC 6166 is that it shows a blue shift, which means it's moving towards us. Is it time to pack up and move out of our solar system? The next supermassive black hole is located in the constellation of Draco, approximately 10.4 gigalight-years from us. The mass of this supergiant is more than 30 billion solar masses. Besides being incredibly massive, the black hole is also really big. If it replaced our Sun, the diameter of this hole would extend to the orbit of Pluto. The next black hole is one of the most interesting on our list. It has a mass of 40 billion solar masses and is actually a blazar. It's the most energetic of all quasars, super bright distant objects. The blazar's luminosity is 300 trillion times that of the Sun, and more than 25,000 times as great as the luminosity of all 100 to 400 billion stars of the Milky Way galaxy combined. But since the distance to this quasar is about 12.1 billion light-years, we can't see it directly. But we know that the central black hole of the quasar consumes huge amounts of matter, about 4,000 solar masses of material every year. IC 1101 is a supergiant elliptical galaxy. It's the most massive known galaxy so far. Since this galaxy is elliptical, it isn't filled with gas. That's why the star formation in that region is very low. As for the black hole at the center of this galaxy, it lies in the mass range of 40 to 100 billion solar masses and emits clear radio signals. But wait for this champion. Astronomers have discovered a gravitational space wonder that has grown to really unimaginable proportions. The black hole I'm talking about is TON 618, and it's a mind-boggling 66 billion solar masses. Yep, we've got another ultra-massive black hole here. Imagine gathering all the stars in our home Milky Way galaxy and squishing the matter they're made of into one black hole. And it still won't be enough to create a TON 618. If this monster of a black hole replaced the Sun, its radius would be more than 40 times the size of Neptune's orbit. You know that black holes are incredibly dense, but it doesn't mean they're some kind of space predators roaming galaxies and munching on everything they come across. TON 618, for example, still has a whole galaxy filled with stars and other stuff happily orbiting it without getting pulled inside. So the perception of black holes as giant vacuum cleaners is wrong. In reality, it's incredibly hard to grow a black hole. Try and you'll see. And now, what if a supermassive black hole, like the one that dwells at the center of our home Milky Way galaxy, moved a bit closer to our solar system? The answer is simple. We'd be doomed. The distance between this huge thing and Earth would be several dozens of light years, and still, it would wreak total havoc on our planet. Earth, along with other objects making up the solar system, would be tugged into the black hole's orbit and doomed to spin around it for eternity. But you can relax and breathe out. Such massive black holes stay away from us at the moment.
You're one of over 8 billion people alive on Earth. Let's zoom out. Our planet is just one of 8 planets in our solar system. In the galaxy, our neighborhood is just one of almost 4,000. And from what we know so far, there are billions of galaxies in the entire universe. That itself may also be growing. It's highly unlikely that we're the only living creatures in the universe. Surely, there must be some other habitable planet. Here's where the Fermi paradox comes in. The idea got its name from a man named Enrico Fermi. Back in the 50s, he pointed out that if other life forms were out there and had the tech to travel through space, they should have visited us by now. These days, we have better telescopes that allow scientists to discover over 5,000 planets outside our solar system. Yet, still no sign of life. Throughout the years, there have been many suggested solutions to the Fermi paradox. These outer world beings may be just too far away for a friendly chat. We've seen it in movies, spaceships traveling between stars as easily as cars on a highway. But in reality, making a way through space is a slow and cumbersome process. Even our fastest rocket would take thousands of years to reach a nearby star. When you add in the vastness of the cosmos, it's like trying to find a living needle in the biggest cosmic haystack available. Now, we could just as easily be the very first civilization to emerge in the universe. It's a lonely thought, and it also puts a lot of pressure on us. If we're the only ones, we need to preserve life on our planet, not just for our sake, but also because if we fade away, all life fades away with us. The universe has been around for billions of years, but intelligent life like ours has only existed for a tiny fraction of that time. Maybe we're just early bloomers, waiting for someone else to catch up. To support this theory, a study was done in 2015 using the Hubble Space Telescope. And this is what it showed. Out of all the worlds that could sustain life, only 8% are as old as the Earth. The rest of them are too young and still haven't reached that point in their evolution for life to thrive. There could also be the possibility that our galactic relatives are watching us from afar. A scientist from another planet may be studying us as primitive life forms right now. He may not want to disturb us just yet, the same way we look at ants in an ant farm during science class. On that same note, maybe they're just not ready to interact with us because they've calculated a precise, perfect timing for our meetup. So they're lying dormant in a hibernation status. And they might be right to do so. Why rush into things when we've got all of eternity ahead? There's also the idea that our planet and us humans just aren't cool enough for others to play with, and won't be until we're evolved enough to be welcomed into the Galactic High School's senior class. Or perhaps life is more fragile than we believe. A 2016 study suggested that it's in the early years of a planet where life makes its way. That's when the planet is cool enough for water to form. But those conditions may not last long thanks to the greenhouse effect. So even if life has existed in the universe every now and then, it never evolved to a stage where it could have contacted us. And what if life's ultimate test comes much later? Several thinkers believe that civilizations tend to destroy themselves at some point in their technological evolution. And this may be a potential future for us, too. We're just not there yet. Maybe we'll come to build technology so smart and so powerful that it will overwhelm us, leading to our demise. Well, if it can happen to us, who's to say it didn't happen to other species in the past on other planets? Amidst all these theories, there's one possibility that's both sobering and profound. We may truly be alone in the universe, forever. Perhaps the conditions for life are so rare that Earth is the only oasis in a vast desert of emptiness. The creepiest answer to the Fermi paradox has a name, though, and it's called the dark forest theory. It first appeared in the 1980s. According to it, the universe is a huge version of a haunted forest, and other types of creatures are out there playing a game of hide-and-seek. It's the expanded version of the survival of the fittest. History on Earth shows that less technologically advanced groups usually end up worse off when meeting more advanced ones. The huge differences in technology often lead to a situation where attacking first seems like the best option. If there's even a small chance that cosmic neighbors might harm us, destroying them first could be our only hope. So if the galaxy is full of advanced life, it's smart for us to stay quiet and avoid contact. Other civilizations would probably reach the same conclusion. Even peaceful ones might feel forced to attack to survive. That's why some scientists criticize the idea of sending messages out there and think searching for them might be pointless. But this idea isn't new. A story from the 40s called First Contact describes humans meeting other types of civilizations for the first time. The two groups became friends, but can't risk letting each other find their home planets. They'd rather destroy each other than risk their safety. Another story, The Forge of God, talks about the danger of our signals reaching hostile species. It compares Earth's broadcasts to a baby's cries attracting wolves. It suggests that we might be in danger because of our naivete. The dark force theory was also explored in a radio play called Calls from Far Away. It shows how discovering otherworldly life on Pluto changes people's views. Some claim the news is fake, others try to understand the reality that we're not alone. But it also suggests that maybe we should focus on our own problems instead of reaching for the stars. If that doesn't sound scary, this will. We've been sending signals of our existence into the cosmos for decades now. By now, any potential civilization within 100 light-years of us might be getting our signals, and if they're advanced enough, they'll know exactly where to find us. If there's any reason why we need to hide from them, it's already too late. Galactic cousins aside, we do need to continue our research for habitable planets for a more pressing reason. Our cozy Earth won't be here forever. When our star fades, all life within the solar system will fade with it. Current estimations claim we've got about 1.3 billion years left before our planet becomes uninhabitable. It will become too hot for water to exist, and without water there is no life, at least not as we know it. So, it begs the following questions. What if there are other types of creatures out there that don't need water to exist? Our type of life needs water because it acts as a solvent. It's an environment where various chemicals can interact with each other to generate something that lives. Some new piece of research suggests that there may be a substitute for water out there in the universe – carbon dioxide. At certain temperatures and under a certain amount of pressure, it acts the same way, allowing chemicals to mingle. If that's true, then our list of known habitable planets would increase dramatically. Sure, we humans will probably never be able to survive on their surface, but other creatures may have evolved to do so. One planet that may feature these weird life conditions is closer than we think – Venus. Its atmosphere is made out of 97% carbon dioxide. It's also very hot and has enough pressure to sustain this theoretical model. So, theoretically, humans can survive an asteroid that has the potential to destroy entire planets. It won't be a walk in the park, though. Let's go back in time to 66 million years ago, in the late Cretaceous period. The Earth, before humans, where dinosaurs are thriving. The plants and animals are rich and diverse. You'd see a T-Rex chasing a Triceratops, or the massive Alamosaurus, one of the biggest animals to ever roam the planet, towering over the landscape. In Texas, they remember the Alamosaurus. And watch out for the Ankylosaurus, a living tank swinging its tail like a wrecking ball at any threat. As you're about to enjoy a quiet evening under the stars, a bright new light appears in the sky of the northern hemisphere. Now, a new star in the sky doesn't really stand out at first. It's just twinkling like the rest. But give it a few hours and you'll notice it's getting brighter. Check again the next night, and boom, it's the brightest thing in the sky, outshining planets and even the moon. Then finally, it horrifyingly outshines the sun. The star was the Chicxulub asteroid, which left a gigantic crater now called Chicxulub Crater in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. The asteroid enters the Earth's atmosphere at a blistering 12.5 miles per second. It blasts through 60 miles of the atmosphere in about 3 seconds. It falls so fast that even the air can't get out of its way. The air gets squashed and heats up to thousands of degrees in a blink. Before the asteroid even touches the ground, this super hot air has already vaporized much of the sea where it's about to strike, near the Yucatan Peninsula. Then, in a flash, the asteroid smashes into the Earth, screaming over Central America with a loud boom that echoes everywhere. It doesn't just smash the ground, it makes the soil and rock flow like liquid. The asteroid digs a hole so wide and deep that it nearly touches Earth's inner layers and throws up dirt more than 20 miles high. At that exact moment of impact, the asteroid also turns its massive speed and weight into heat in a split second. It puts so much energy into the Earth that it makes molecules move faster than the surface of the Sun. This massive energy created a giant ball of plasma, superhot charged gas that includes bits of vaporized rock. This all shot out at incredible speeds. The shockwave from the impact and the heat turned the Earth around the crash site into gas instantly. This set off earthquakes all around the world. And it's not just the rocks flying around that you need to worry about. As they plummet through the sky, they rub against the air, heating up so much that they set fires all around the world. The heat they give off could be compared to an oven cranked up to its highest setting. This fiery shower causes most of the world's trees to burn down. The entire world is now on fire. Soon it changes everything. In a blink, dinosaurs were wiped out, making way for mammals to rise. And not only dinosaurs, 75% of species and big creatures disappeared, leaving behind only some small birds and critters. So, how could you, a human, survive something like that? Now, some animals made it back then. To survive, we need to learn from their resilience. The only birds that survive even in the toughest conditions are the ones nesting safely on the ground. Among the few larger animals that manage to dodge extinction, all have ways to deal with the heat. Some, like certain small mammals, snakes, and lizards, can dig themselves into cooler underground burrows. Others, like crocodiles and turtles, just hide in the water. So, if you're exactly on the other side of the planet when the strike happens, and you act super fast, you might just make it. Right now, the impact is about 10,000 miles away, but don't underestimate its power. As soon as you hear the loud boom, head underground as quickly as you can. And be careful, because you'll feel the earth shake about 30 minutes later. Hide in a deep cave, preferably with a narrow entrance. It would protect you from the falling debris, and the temperatures underground would be stable. Also, some caves have natural water sources, rivers or streams. You might also prepare for the not-so-great diet of insects, fungi, or poor small animals that also seek refuge in the cave system. But it's better than nothing. You also need to be extremely far away from any large bodies of water. Being near the ocean might seem like a safe bet during a massive asteroid impact because the sea can buffer extreme temperature changes. But the earthquakes trigger terrifying tsunamis, even in lakes or fjords. The asteroid's crash sets off not just one tsunami, but many, and they're as tall as skyscrapers. Within an hour, colossal waves between 600 and 1,000 feet high hit the Gulf Coast, slamming into places like Mexico and the southern United States, and flooding miles inland. These waves are so powerful, they even push rivers backward. These tsunamis continue around coastlines, reaching the east coast of the United States, and 6 hours later, they hit Europe, Africa, and the Mediterranean. By 15 hours after the impact, there isn't a coastline on Earth that hasn't felt the wrath of these waves. Well, let's say you survived the initial impact somewhere deep underground, but your troubles have only begun. The Chicxulub asteroid strikes a region loaded with sulfur. This sends 100 billion tons of sulfur and an enormous amount of water into the sky. The water vapor forms massive storm clouds. They start to rain acid. In colder places, huge snowstorms bury the land under feet of snow each day. The impact also vaporizes massive amounts of oil, throwing up 150 football stadiums worth of it into the air. This oil turns into a thick black soot in the stratosphere. It coats the Earth like black paint. And even when the acid rain calms down, this carbon stays up above the clouds and doesn't wash away. This sooty layer blocks out 90% of sunlight, plunging the Earth into a cold darkness that lasts for at least 3 years. The world cools down by about 50 degrees on average. Now, when you finally leave your deep cave, you must look for places where you won't freeze. The only spots spared from the frost are tropical islands like Madagascar, India, which was an island back then, and Indonesia. These places have surviving plants and animals, and they even continue to get fresh water, unlike most of the world. Everything else in the world looks like a huge nuclear wasteland. These tropical islands are safe spots during an asteroid apocalypse, but don't think of them as paradise. These places still only get about 10% of their usual sunlight and barely enough rain to avoid turning into deserts. In this chilly, gloomy setting, most food chains fall apart. If you want to survive, you'll need to bring lots of extra food with you, for the next 6 years at least. Now, some things are lucky enough to survive. Fossils tell us that freshwater ecosystems did well, so staying close to a river or estuary might be your best shot at finding food. You could come across turtles, crocodiles, and some fish. Animals like clams, snails, and small crustaceans that live in the sediment also manage to hang on. And while a bit warmer than everything else, these places are no walk in the park. You'd need to pack warm clothes to have any chance of survival. Now, if we add all this together, the best spot for surviving the Chicxulub asteroid would be Indonesia. It's a mountainous, tropical country that consists of several islands. There, you'll find bearable temperatures, a bit of rainwater, and a deep cave for shelter. This could protect you from the falling tektites, the intense heat, and even help you find something to eat in the rivers and lakes. But if you stumble upon any shrew-like creatures while scavenging for food, time traveler, please let them be. It's not clear how many survived the Chicxulub impact, and eating one could have unforeseen effects on the future of humanity. Like, don't eat your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, right? Attention, attention! Something very exciting is going on Saturn. It's called a spoke season, and no, the planet isn't turning into a giant gaseous wheel. Let me tell you more about this phenomenon. Each year, NASA's Hubble Space Telescope devotes some of its time to observing Saturn, a gas giant, like me, the second largest planet in the solar system. And this space body always has something new to surprise us with. For example, look at one of the latest images of the gas giant. See those smudgy spokes? They mean that Saturn's spoke season is starting. Like our planet, Saturn is tilted on its axis. That's why it has 4 seasons. But since the orbit of the gas giant is much larger, each of these seasons lasts about 7 Earth years. Keep this in mind, it's important. Now, the next thing we need to talk about to understand the concept of the unique spoke season on Saturn is the equinox. On Earth, it's the moment when the sun is exactly above the equator of the planet, and day and night are of the same length. But on Saturn, it's something a bit different. An equinox occurs when Saturn's rings are tilted edge-on to the sun. And even though equinoxes on Saturn happen every spring and fall, just like on our planet, they actually occur very seldom, roughly once in 15 Earth years. That's why astronomers are so excited about this event. Now look, there are 2 smudgy spokes in this ring. It's called Ring B on the left of the picture. They resemble the spokes on a bicycle. The shading and shape of spokes vary. They may seem dark or light, it depends on the angle and illumination. Sometimes they might look like blobs instead of something with a classical radial spoke shape. They also don't last long, but more and more will start to appear the closer we're to May 6, 2025. That's when the autumnal equinox on Saturn will occur. But what causes the spokes? Astronomers think it might be the gas giant's magnetic field. When a planetary magnetic field interacts with the solar wind, it creates an electrically charged environment. On Earth, this results in northern lights, also called aurora borealis. And if we speak about Saturn, the tiniest icy ring particles might get charged too. And it probably temporarily levitates these particles above the larger boulders the rings consist of. For the first time, the spokes in Saturn's rings were spotted by NASA's Voyager mission. It happened in the early 1980s. At the time, we didn't know that these spokes were a seasonal phenomenon. Voyager 2 just passed by the planet and then sped on. To figure out what these spokes were and how they functioned, astronomers needed a space telescope that could observe Saturn's rings from afar, like Hubble. The latest equinox on Saturn occurred in 2009. At that time, NASA's Cassini space probe was traveling around the gas giant. It sent many amazing images back to Earth. They quickly proved that the spokes weren't caused by gravitational interactions with Saturn or the influence of the gas giant's moons or small moonlets, which make up the planet's rings. It was the year 2005 when Cassini confirmed that the spokes were related to Saturn's magnetic field. That mission was finished in 2017. Now Hubble keeps its long-term monitoring of the changes on and around Saturn. Despite all the observations, astronomers still can't predict the beginning and duration of the spoke season. Luckily, Saturn's prominent rings are a perfect laboratory for studying this phenomenon. Because even though other gas giants in the solar system also have rings, those are not so visible, and scientists don't know whether spokes occur on those planets. But these spokes aren't the only exciting space phenomenon. Our solar system is a fascinating place, that's why. If you were standing at the Martian equator barefoot, your feet wouldn't get cold. The temperature there would feel like on a sunny spring day on Earth. But you'd have to wear a hat. At the height of your head, it would be freezing cold. Now Venus spins backward compared to most other planets in the solar system and the Sun itself. One of the explanations astronomers have come up with is a collision with some solid object, for example an asteroid, that happened in the past. Jupiter's moon Io has hundreds of volcanoes, which makes the satellite the most volcanically active object in the solar system. The Moon also has a weird yellowish surface. It looks blotted and resembles a pepperoni pizza. Yum. Europa, one of Jupiter's 4 biggest moons, is covered in ice. This ice shell can be 10 to 15 miles thick. It also has some smooth patches, so if you're into ice skating, you would like it there. If you lump together all the known asteroids in the solar system, their total weight would still be smaller than 10% of the mass of our Moon. Scientists believe that Mercury might still have a partially molten core. It could explain why Mercury has a magnetic field, even if it's just 1% as strong as Earth's. Mercury's core takes up around 42% of the planet's volume. Mercury also has wrinkles. When its iron core was cooling, the planet's crust contracted. It made the surface of the planet uneven. These wrinkles are called lobate scarps. The biggest of these scarps can be hundreds of miles long and up to a mile high. Uranus is the only planet in the solar system to rotate on its side. The reason might be an ancient mega-powerful collision with an Earth-sized object, but so far it's just a theory. Mars might get a set of rings of its own in the next 70 million years. Its largest moon, called Phobos, is orbiting closer and closer to the planet. One day, it's likely to get broken apart by the gravitational pull of the red planet and turn into a ring that can last for millions of years. I won't be around then, so I'll just take their word for it. Scientists think that the Moon's surface has more craters than Earth's because it doesn't have so much natural activity going on. Winds, rains, earthquakes, and erosion keep altering the surface of our planet, but the Moon has almost no weather to change its appearance. Saturn is the most flattened planet in the solar system. It's squished at the poles, and any point on the equator is about 4,000 miles farther from the center of the planet than the poles. The Hubble Space Telescope weighs almost as much as 2 male African elephants and is as long as a big school bus. Yeah, that's a launch I'd love to see. 2 elephants in a school bus. It's made almost 1.5 million observations since it was launched in 1990. Astronomers have used this data to write about 15,000 scientific papers. Everything on Earth and everything people can see in space with the help of telescopes is normal matter. It's made up of atoms and molecules and adds up to less than 5% of the universe. Almost 68% of the universe is dark energy, and the remaining 27% is dark matter. Does that really matter? As a matter of fact, it does. Saturn has a mysterious vortex swirling over the planet's south pole. The whole thing resembles an enormous hurricane-like storm, measuring almost 5,000 miles across. That's 2/3 the diameter of Earth. What confuses astronomers is that although the phenomenon looks like a hurricane, it doesn't behave like one. Saturn is also the only planet in the solar system that's less dense than water. In other words, if you found a bathtub huge enough to fit this gas giant, it would float there like a rubber duck. Earthquakes on the Moon don't occur as often as on our planet, but when they do, it happens closer to the center of the satellite. Scientists think moonquakes might be caused by the gravity of Earth and the Sun. One of Saturn's moons, Iapetus, has bizarre two-tone coloring. The difference between the Moon's 2 hemispheres is great. One of them is light and the other is eerily dark. Scientists haven't figured out this mystery yet. Now, the only asteroid belt in the solar system astronauts know about is between Mars and Jupiter. There are thousands of asteroids in this area. They're irregularly shaped solid objects of different sizes, but all of them are way smaller than a planet. Scientists have analyzed the chemical content of some meteorites found in the Sahara Desert, Antarctica, and other places. Some of the rocks turned out to have a Martian origin. Others arrived from the Moon or the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Ooh, space rocks. So we can also say, space rocks. Yeah, we could say that.
Imagine a powerful giant, like the Sun, clashing with a tiny yet mighty opponent, a small black hole. The collision is imminent, and the fate of the solar system hangs in the balance. Will the Sun be able to withstand the intense gravitational pull of a tiny black hole, or will it be swallowed whole? The answer lies in the forces at play in this mind-blowing cosmic collision. So let's break them down. First of all, what is a black hole? A black hole is a region of space where the gravity is so strong that nothing, not even light, can escape from it. Like a cosmic vacuum cleaner, it sucks up anything that gets too close. It's so massive that it warps the fabric of space-time around it. Black holes are one of the most scary and mysterious objects in the universe, a powerful force of nature that defies our understanding of physics, a true enigma of the universe. Black holes come in different sizes, from small ones that are only a few miles wide, to supermassive ones that are billions of times the mass of the sun. Most of them are formed by the collapse of massive stars. After the black hole is born, it starts to grow in size by eating everything in its path. And if two or more black holes collide with each other, they can merge into one enormous cosmic monster in a terrifying dance. But what about the smaller ones? The smallest known black holes are called stellar black holes. It's a type of black hole that weighs 3 to 10 masses of our sun, while being very small. It's like taking all the matter in the solar system and squeezing it into something the size of New York City. And yes, it's considered very small. Just for comparison, intermediate mass black holes weigh between 100 to 1,000 solar masses, and supermassive black holes weigh millions or billions of solar masses while being unimaginably huge in size. So, stellar black holes are basically nothing compared to their relatives. Imagine a massive star, bigger than our own sun and with a heart made of nuclear fuel, burning bright and hot. But as the star runs out of fuel, gravity takes over and starts to squeeze the star. The more it squeezes, the hotter it gets, until the star's core reaches a temperature of billions of degrees. Eventually, the core collapses under its own gravity. This creates a massive blast called a supernova. This collapse creates a singularity, which means a point of infinite density and gravity. This point is surrounded by an event horizon, the invisible line beyond which nothing, including light, can escape. And just like that, voila, a stellar black hole is born. Pretty mind-blowing, isn't it? Stellar black holes are the most common type of black holes we know of. These guys can be found all across our galaxy. So, what are the chances that such a little monster will come for our sun? And in that case, what will happen to us? Well, actually, the likelihood of the sun colliding with any black hole is incredibly small. It's almost impossible for it to happen. Even though stellar black holes are the most common type of black holes in our universe, they aren't common at all. The chances of the sun and some black hole crossing paths is so rare, it's basically like winning the intergalactic lottery. Only this win wouldn't be that pleasant. For 2023, the closest known black hole in our solar system is Gaia BH1. It's about 10 times heavier than our sun, and even this one is about 1,600 light-years away from us, which is a quadrillion miles. So, it's safe to say that our sun is not going anywhere anytime soon. But never say never, right? Just like with any astronomical event, we need to understand the different ways something like this could happen. For example, it would be possible if a rogue black hole passed through our solar system, much like a comet or asteroid passing by. Unfortunately, unlike comets and asteroids, black holes are invisible and can only be detected by their gravitational pull. So it's not like we'd see a big, ominous black hole hurtling towards us. Rather, we'd only know it was there if it caused some sort of disturbance in the orbits of nearby objects. So what now? We know that the sun is a massive, luminous star at the center of our solar system. It's about 4.5 billion years old and has enough fuel to last for another 5 billion years. This star is so big that it's hard to even comprehend its size. In fact, if you were to put all the planets in our solar system inside of it, there would still be room for more. And it's so massive that it contains almost 100% of the total mass of the solar system. So it's hard to imagine how some insignificant small black hole thousands of times smaller than this star can devour it. And you're right, it won't. Well, at least not completely. So imagine if a rogue black hole arrived in our solar system and has begun to approach the sun. As it gets closer and closer, the black hole's immense gravity will start to pull the material from the surface of the sun. The sun would start to get stretched and distorted. This is called spaghettification. Imagine a rubber band being stretched until it snaps. That's kind of what would happen to it. This gathered material will form a swirling disk around the black hole, called an accretion disk. As more and more material is pulled in, the disk will heat up and start emitting intense radiation. And as the sun gets pulled in, it would start to release massive amounts of energy in the form of light and heat. The sun would become much brighter and hotter than before. The sun's outer layers would be vaporized, creating a massive cloud of gas and dust that would expand outwards. It would be like a cosmic fireworks show, but with terrible consequences. Even though it would be one of the most spectacular views in the universe, we wouldn't be able to see it. As you might have guessed, the Earth would be in for a really rough time. The intense radiation and solar material would cause massive wildfires, and the intense heat would vaporize the oceans. The Earth would be bathed in a constant stream of high-energy particles, and the atmosphere would be ionized. In short, the chances of any life surviving would be close to zero. And this collision would have far-reaching consequences not only for the Earth, but for the entire solar system. The intense radiation and heat would vaporize everything in its path. All the planets would be destroyed. Now, the Sun, being a larger object than a typical star, wouldn't be completely devoured by the black hole, but it would be significantly distorted and disrupted. The intense gravity of the black hole would cause the Sun's outer layers to be pulled away, creating a massive blast called a tidal disruption event. But either way, in the end, the black hole would win. It would grow in size, and a new accretion disk would form around it. As we've seen, the collision of the Sun with a black hole, whether it be a tiny or stellar one, would be an epic and catastrophic event. But thankfully, as we've already mentioned, the likelihood of such a collision happening is extremely low. However, that doesn't mean we should stop studying black holes and their potential impact on the universe. The more we learn about these mysterious objects, the better equipped we'll be to understand and predict their behavior. So, let's keep researching, exploring, and observing the depths of space. And who knows, maybe one day we'll come across a black hole that's just too curious and gets too close to the Sun. Let's hope by that time we will already be living on other distant planets.